all those wishing to adopt docket A, please raise your placard. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then all those wishing to adopt docket B, please raise your placard. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On a vote of 11 to 5, we now adopt docket A, consisting of fair representation and consumer privacy. So now a bill entitled Fair Representation rolls off the docket at 9:10. I now call for a sponsorship speech. Is there any such sponsor? Representative Leong.
Thank the chair. Hey everyone, that's Representative Leong for my judges, Liang. First time saying legislative session. As always, at the leisure of all those above me, just quick thumbs up whenever everyone's ready.
Always ready.
Perfect.
Always ready.
The history of this Congress should be looked at through a lens of equality, because we were founded when a repressive monarchy tried to take away the voices of our constituents. So today, let's go back to our roots. Finally start giving voices to our constituents again. Pass my bill. You passed for 3 key reasons and 3 key sections. First, Section 1 establishes ranked choice voting, or RCV, giving voters a larger variety of candidates to pick from and then rank by preference, sort of like a debate round. NPR explains that in RCV processes, there are 2 possible scenarios. 1, either a candidate right away wins 50% or more of everyone's first place votes, and the election ends there. But secondly, and more commonly, a candidate won't win 50% of the majority, and then you enter a runoff, where the last place candidate is eliminated until you get to the amount of candidates at the end. Simply put, ranked choice voting gives your choices more variety, because now there are more representatives for you to choose from and more viewpoints that can be represented. That's why Science Direct finds in 2018 that California cities adopting ranked choice voting saw increases in the number of candidates of color running for office and the probability of both women and women of color winning office as well. That means ranked choice voting is directly good for representation. And hey, it makes sense. Obviously representation will get better when my only 2 options aren't 2 guys old enough to be my grandpa. But secondly, Section 2 ensures that the viewpoints set out in ranked choice voting are codified into multi-member districts, because now multiple representation can happen. The Hill explained in June of 2022 that the last House midterms were so close they could have swung either way with just a couple thousand votes difference. That means every time a winner-take-all district is won in favor of either Democrats or Republicans, the other 40% misses out, because now the representative office doesn't represent their voices. That's why multi-member districts are so important, because having multiple representatives means more minority representation. A 2021 study on ranked choice voting and multi-member districts, led by professors from Boston University and UPenn, finds that multi-member districts are the only way to stably and reliably ensure representation for people of color, because now it means more viewpoints are heard. But finally, Section 3 increases representation by literally giving us more representation, expanding the size of the House. The American Academy for Arts and Sciences finds that the United Kingdom House of Commons has 650 members, and the German Bundestag has 709. So logistically, obviously there isn't a problem if these countries' governments are still functioning with an expanded House. But what does having more representatives to elect actually mean for our people? Well, increased voter turnout. BBC tells us in 2019 that voter turnout in the UK is 20% higher than voter turnout in the US. Why? Because when there are more candidates to choose from, there's a lesser group that each of them represents. So there's a higher chance that voters feel like their voice is going to be heard. That's so important, because voter turnout is the single biggest way to ensure proper representation. West Virginia University confirms that states with better voter turnout have less restrictive voter laws, higher minimum wages, and more general health care benefits compared to states with lower turnout, because their representatives are actually listening to their voices. Any negation speaker that wants to win this round has to prove that representation decreases or voter participation decreases. Because if they don't, the affirmation wins in every world. It's time to find finally start representing our constituents. Pass my bill.
Speech time, 4 minutes exactly. 4 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please rise. We'll first go to Senator Ostheimer.
Hey, so under this bill, how big can these multi-member districts be?
It's the population of the United States divided by the population of the small states. So it's around like 570. Oh, multi-member districts?
Yeah.
Sorry. Less than 6.
It's 3 to 5.
Yeah.
How do you gerrymander a district?
By drawing the lines of certain candidates.
Right, you put a lot of your enemies in one district and just barely a winning majority in your own.
Yes.
Doesn't that become easier when you have a variety of district sizes?
No, because now you can elect multiple members per district. It's not.
Senator Melendez.
Today's legislation doesn't give me clarity. Maybe you can. How many types of RCD is there?
A lot.
Right. Which are we using under today's legislation?
The most simple version. You rank the candidates until you get.
Why isn't that written in the policy?
Because ranked choice voting
Okay,
has.
let's go ahead and say we pass today's legislation. Why can't states just choose whichever benefits them the most?
Well, it's still more representation than.
No.
Well.
You agree that there's multiple types of ranked
Sure.
choice voting. Not all have the same benefits. Do you agree?
Sure.
Okay, needing ambiguities allows states to control,
Senator
right?
Long.
Is representation inherently better just because I have more people represented by one representative?
Yes.
No, it's not, because what if that one representative has to now represent a generalized ideology, rather than right now where you can represent local ideology?
I would argue that representing moderate ideology are better because it's better for bipartisan
I'm not saying it's
collaboration.
moderate, right? I'm saying you have to generalize a bunch of issues rather than the entire
Wait,
point
but if
of-
there's less people you have to represent,
No.
that's less
The entire
generalization.
point of being a representative is you're able to represent local viewpoints. Population and ideology aren't
Senator Marathe.
Hi, is the average American really keyed into their local politics?
Not really.
Okay, so if we're giving them 6 options instead of 2, how is that going to make them pick better?
Right. Candidates have to run advertisements, right? I'm sure you see different campaign ads everywhere.
Right.
If you have to appeal to more people, then policies will be
Candidates have to run advertisements right now. You
Sure.
just told me Americans aren't keyed into local politics right now. What
No,
changed?
Americans don't vote for lower candidates if they feel like they can't win.
Wait, they vote, they just don't know who they're voting for.
They don't vote for third-party candidates because they feel like they can't.
Questioning period is the last. Speakers may be seated.
Thank the chair.
Thank you. Just so we're clear, also on questioning, I'm using the reverse order of the speaking order, just so everyone's clear. We're now on line to proceed to litigation. All negation speakers rise. Senator Raoufi, you have the floor.
I think the chair. For the representative of the chamber, that's Senator Raoufi. Raoufi. Also, my brother's ready. Just let me know. E pluribus unum, the great seal of our nation. This Latin saying translates to out of many, one. America is created by many events, many trials and errors, many turning points, and many people. But one democracy keeps us binded. Fail today's legislation. When you pass today, there are 2 main effects that need to be analyzed. How ranked choice voting affects people and how it affects candidates. First, let's understand how this legislation specifically affects people voting. If you look to Section 2B, your vote doesn't just matter for your first or even your second choice, but for multi-candidate elections. It has to be at least 3 and at max 5 people in the election. That means your 5th rank overall can still become a representative. What does this mean for Americans? Americans don't want their 5th choice to represent them. They want their first choice too. When you take that away, it's very simple. Americans don't vote. The Foundation of Government Accountability on August 25th, 2022 found that in May, where ranked choice voting was implemented for congressional districts, just like this legislation, 9,000 votes were lost due to ballot exhaustion, where the votes of Americans weren't accurately represented by the elections. But second, let's look at how this legislation specifically affects candidates. In a district where there are more representatives, every candidate has the opportunity to be elected. What does this mean? Well, candidates know they don't have to get first or second in an election to get elected. Why does that change the current process? That means there's two main ways that they can win elections. And no, it's not just being more moderate. The first is paying more for campaigning so more people recognize their name. As Stanford University finds on October 30th of 2023, in congressional elections, just a 15% increase in campaign spending led to a 10% increase in votes for that particular candidate. If there are even just 10 people on your ranked choice voting slip, you are going to vote for the people that you recognize the most. This puts the advantage to higher income candidates who spend more on their campaigns. But the second way they're going to gain votes is through increasing and exaggerating their views. As The Hill found on October 30th of 2022, the ranked choice system that is being used around the country to conduct elections with specifically more than 2 candidates is more biased towards extreme candidates and away from moderate ones. That's because when you double down on your policies, you may not get the one, but under this legislation, you are guaranteed to get in the top 5, which is all that is needed under Section 2B of this legislation. And making this system widespread only makes voting less appealing. That ballot exhaustion, when implemented in ranked choice voting, only hurts democracy. As the Washington Post found on October 27th of 2023, Idaho banned ranked choice voting because voters were forced to choose between their backup choices or risk being disenfranchised. Collectively, 93% of registered Republicans in the political caucus refused to vote because of this very sentiment. That's because on a wider scale, people aren't going to vote if they don't even know where their votes are going to. And lower voter turnout hurts the very constituents we are here to represent. A study by the National Library of Medicine on June 8th of 2022 found that lower voter turnout in specific areas, also known as turnout deserts, are 400% more likely to occur in minority areas. And when voters aren't recognized, their views aren't represented, that is the epitome of a failed democracy. Don't let it become reality. Yeah.
Speech time 4:07. Questioners rise. We'll first go to Senator Furia.
Hey, Senator. You said that you want voters to be able to see that their candidates are winning, right?
Yes.
What happens if they vote for a candidate and nobody else does?
That candidate doesn't win.
And their ballot becomes pretty much useless, right? What if that voter likes more than one candidate, and now one of their candidates may have lost, but another one can still win?
The issue with this legislation is that when there's so many candidates in a particular election, those candidates are only going to get elected because they either spend more on their campaign or they have exaggerated views.
That's not necessarily what happens.
Senator Misra.
Okay, so you agree that ranked choice voting has some problems?
Yes.
Right, but no matter what we do today, it's going to continue to be in use, at least in some areas, right?
Some states use ranked
Okay,
choice
so it's going
voting
to
in some
continue to be in
areas.
use. So shouldn't we federalize it to improve it, to address those issues?
Wait, just because we use it in some areas doesn't mean we need to implement it all across the United
I
States.
know, but if there's problems like this, let's use this Congress to pass these bills and fix those problems.
I'm telling you, ranked choice voting is what makes those problems worse. When you pass ranked choice
talking about,
voting,
like, the code-
it forces candidates to
you talking
become more exaggerated in their views. And
Senator
they spend-
Khan.
Hi, Senator.
Hi.
Do wealthier candidates have a better chance of election right now?
Yes.
So then how is your argument unique?
That issue gets worse under this legislation. If you get 10 people on your ranked choice slip, you're going to vote for the people you
But
recognize.
right now, if people are already voting for the person that they're most familiar with, why is that a bad thing? If you're the one who's spreading the word, and you're the
It
one who's
gets
setting it
worse
there.
under this legislation because there's more candidates.
But it's already the reason right now, and when there's more candidates, then it's not just about the top person.
Well,
it's about the top or the second and the third.
if it doesn't get fixed with this legislation, that just sounds like another reason to fail.
Senator Drubetskoy.
Okay, you tell us that voter turnout's going to decrease, right?
Yes.
Okay, Senator Yang just told you when we implemented it to tell the exact opposite trend. If I'm the voter and I'm going to the polls, why am I going to suddenly stop going
The
to
example,
ranked choice voting?
the example that Senator Leon brought was in California. It wasn't specifically for congressional districts. I told you that in Maine, when it was for congressional districts, voter
Senator,
turnout
what is the
decreased.
logic behind me being a voter and knowing that my ranking matters and then saying, oh, actually, I'm just going to stop going altogether?
Because when voters don't know how their votes are being used in elections, they don't want to
Wait a
vote.
minute, we've passed more like knowledge about
Questioning period has elapsed. Speakers may be seated. I think the chair turns to you. Affirmation speakers, rise. Senator DuPaul.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. That's Senator DuPaul. Spelled D-U-P-A-U-L. That's D-U-P-A-U-L for my judgment. Help you find me. My first name is Breck. I know there's a lot of you in here, so I'll take a silence as an indication of all this. As the sun of democracy seems to set on the horizon of history, we're given a choice to ignite the flames of fair representation, to let the darkness of disenfranchisement prevail. Today's legislation is a torch to guide us in this darkness. Ignite it, ignite the will of American people, and pass. First, affirm to ignite the very spirit of American democracy by empowering voices through ranked choice voting. Partisan politics have pulled apart our nation and affected every level of government. According to the Associated Press last July, 56% of Americans do not trust that the results of the 2024 elections will be fair. But if that's not shocking enough, the Brookings Institute reported last October that a quarter of Americans believe that violence is necessary if we are to save our country from rigged elections. Too many people have lost faith in our government. But ranked choice voting holds the torch to light a fire of hope, because Americans believe it's a more trustworthy system for electing our officials. Northeastern University in 2022 found that ranked choice voting improves voter confidence because 80% of Americans believe it's an effective and easy to understand solution. Now, Representative Raoufi, you told us that turnout decreases when we've implemented ranked choice voting. That's empirically baseless, because when people have trust in a system, they're more likely to go to the polls. The University of Missouri St. Louis found in 2021 that turnout increases by 11% in cities with ranked choice voting. That's the power of ranked choice voting. It ensures that more voices are heard and more ballots are cast. So we'll no longer see a Congress pulled apart by the loudest voices, but stitched together with the diverse opinions of the American people. Second, affirm to guide our nation towards a more representative and collaborative future. Multi-member districts cultivate a ground where the plurality of ideas can bloom, replacing the binary battlegrounds that plague politics today. A University of Houston study in the Quarterly Journal of Legislative Study confirms that multi-member districts foster greater competition and diversity. In fact, they increase the representation of both political minorities and historically marginalized communities by more than 30%. We all want our voices heard and our perspectives represented. Which brings us to the third reason we affirm. Third, affirm to create true representation. John Adams wrote at the founding of this nation that elections should produce an exact portrait in miniature of the American people at large. Needless to say, that's not happening. Let's zoom in on Texas to see what I mean. The New York Times, after the 2021 House elections, found that although Democrats in Texas currently poll half of the statewide vote, they win only a third of all seats in the state because of politically and racially discriminatory voting maps. However, a study by the Brennan Center of Justice revealed that multi-member districts can correct gerrymandered ones. The results of the study found that multi-member districts in Texas, Democrats almost perfectly match the statewide share of the vote. So, Senator Ostheimer, you question that don't we increase gerrymandering, but it's actually the opposite. Because in that study, they found that the statewide vote share did not change from a gerrymandered map to an independently commissioned drawn map. District configuration did not alter the results of the study. And that's why multi-member districts are so powerful. As the gavel of progress calls us to action, we stand before the possibility for an era where every voice is a vote, every district a display of democracy, and every election a testament to the tenet.
Thank you, Representative. Speech time 412. Questioners, please rise. Senator Burnside.
Thank you. So in a multi-member district, the representatives of the district can all be from the same party, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so why would that ultimately result in an independent commission?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when we use multi-member districts, we correct gerrymandering, whether it's an independently drawn commission or a
If a district
gerrymandered map.
now contains like 7 or 8
Right.
members that are all
Here's why.
Republicans, doesn't mean
In the status quo, if a party wins 51% of the votes, they get 100% of the seats. In multi-member districts,
but
it's
now
proportional.
there's even more extreme cases.
Senator Adjournment.
I'm just a little confused. How does RCD increase the amount of cases going towards the government if your fifth candidate option
Because of this increase in representation of multiple political candidates, we see a decrease in political mudslinging during the elections.
But if political incentivization only comes in the form of financial assets, then how are we going to make sure that each person can get their money?
Because it's bigger than just money. People want to see their voices heard and represented in government, and when they see that, they turn out to the polls.
You don't have the money to go to these campaign processes. Doesn't that
It's not just about the politics.
Speakers may be seated.
I think the chair.
Negation speakers, rise. All right, so we will be breaking cycles to no negation speakers, so all affirmation speakers, please rise. Senator Misra.
Thank you so much. That is Senator Misra, spelled M-I-S-R-A. Once again, that is M-I-S-R-A. I'll give everyone a second to get ready. This year, I ran for senior class president. I campaigned, I put up posters, I talked to people, I even had an affair with my secretary. I did everything a good president should have done, but much to my dismay, I lost. And as I was wallowing in my sorrow, I could take solace in one thing, the fact that I had lost fair and square. But because that sort of solace has been stripped from millions of Americans, I am proud to affirm. Principally, strike this bill to ensure fair and non-polarized elections. First, let's look to the land of, I don't have any jokes about Alaska, but let's look to Alaska, because that glorious salmon-infested state settles the polarization debate that's going to be repeated a dozen times today. Because in 2022, after adopting RCV, the Republican and Democratic Senate candidate cross-endorsed each other. But I'll concede, that was just one example. Infinitely more damning, however, is a report by the Lugar Center for Bipartisanship released in 2022 that stated Alaska and Maine were the two most bipartisan states in this nation. Surprise, surprise, those were also the only two states in the entire nation that use ranked choice voting. And the reason that we see this trend after adopting ranked choice voting is simple. Because voters now have to rank every candidate instead of selecting one, candidates now have to appeal to everyone across the political spectrum, not just their own party. Next, let's talk about the voting process itself, because Senator Raoufi clearly doesn't think too much about citizens. Because in his eyes, the simple act of bubbling 5 circles on a piece of paper is quite the challenge for the average American. But Senator Raoufi, I am glad to say Americans are defying expectations. After RCV was implemented in New York, an Edison research polled the citizens and found that over 90% of all voters across every ethnic group found the form simple to use, and on top of that, 80% of voters wanted to use RCV again. America needs politicians that serve her interests, not extremist morons that win only because they managed to secure a plurality of the vote. Time and time again, ranked choice voting has ensured that centrist, minority, and most importantly, competent politicians have a moment to shine. If you make a decision to pass, we elect folks that are actually willing to work with their colleagues, and we finally begin to help this country heal its divisions. But first, let's address Senator Ostheimer's arguments on the negation. He argues that this bill increases gerrymandering because he believes that multi-member districts make it easier to gerrymander. In no world is that true. And the reason for that is simple. When we pass, we ensure that moderate politicians are elected. And the reason moderate politicians are elected is because, again, they have to appeal to everyone across the political spectrum. They don't have the luxury of just appealing to one small group of people that's just absolutely extremist. When we elect moderate politicians don't gerrymander. Again, because if they do gerrymander, then they lose their broad support. And if they do want to be elected, they can't afford to lose that broad support. Now, next, let's look to the clash between Senator Raoufi and DuPaul on voter turnout. They both have conflicting statistics. Senator DuPaul says that voter turnout increases. Senator Raoufi says it decreases. Okay, fine. If the statistics are a wash, who does the logic lie with? our side. It's simple. If someone has to bubble in 5 circles instead of bubbling in 1 circle, they're not going to start showing up to elections. Fundamentally, this bill allows our nation to heal its wounds and unite once again. Affirm.
Each time for 10, questioners rise. Senator Raoufi.
Hi, Senator. What's the difference between the examples you put in your bill and this legislation?
There aren't any differences.
With this legislation, multiple candidates are elected, not just one governor or one
And I
mayor.
actually argue that's a good thing, right? When we have multiple people running a district, that forces them to cooperate.
When you say you fill in 5 bubbles, that doesn't mean that one of them is eventually going to get elected. It means multiple of them can get elected, right? Okay, how does that not decrease the fundamental equality across the board when they don't even know how they're being elected?
That's just not true.
Senator Ostheimer.
Is the Republican-Democratic binary good for America? No. It's stifled by ideological diversity. Why is bipartisanship good when both parties are bad?
No, that's just a fundamental. That's such a big generalization. You're just saying both parties are bad. I disagree with that. Both parties have good ideals and bad ideals. The bad ideals are the extremist ideals. If we pass, we get rid of those extremist ideals by forcing politicians to be moderate.
That moderates appeal to everyone, but they only appeal to the middle.
That's not true. When they
Question period is elapsed. Speakers may be seated.
Thank you so much. That was Senator Misra.
All negation speakers, please rise. Senator Drubetskoy.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, that's Senator Drubetskoy speaking for the first time in this legislative session. That's spelled Drubetskoy. You can just call me Drew because I've heard a lot of variations over the past few days. Speaking a little bit earlier and with less prep, but honestly, any implementation is good. I know last year was good. Fun fact: Norwegians call anything they find pretty Texas. Big hats, big people, big food. Except, here's the thing. I know that Texas is crazy from first-hand experience. After all, I've met Senator Lawal and Senator Victoria personally. This legislation is the most Texas we've ever seen across this floor that we have no choice but to negate. Let's set what this bill actually does in the context of our legislation today. This legislative session is failing its constituents. Understand that fundamentally, increasing both RCV and the members that we have in this very legislative session cannot happen in our current political climate. First, everyone in this chamber should feel ashamed. DeGuire told us in February 2022 that we are the most polarized since the Civil War. If that doesn't shock you, I don't know what will. Because in the Civil War, if you remember, they literally went to war with each other. Except here, we're just using our words. And Senator Raoufi already just came up here and told you that the way that RCV inherently works is that people have to increase their negative campaigning. And logically, that makes sense. If you want people to know who you are, you have to go to the extremes of it. That's pretty obvious. Except in our political climate, that makes everything worse. Because we're already incredibly ineffective. And with more partisanship, increases more polarization, makes less efficiency. Microsoft ran an account of this 3 months ago. Here's what they found. The lowest congressional bills passed in history have been 70. I'm going to let you take a guess really quickly at how many this has passed. 20. We passed 20 bills. And when you looked at the correlation, they found that it was because of increasing polarization. So here's what this bill inherently does that will change your political climate, that will change what happens to your constituents. First, understand that the Brennan Center of Justice told us in September of 2023 that when they surveyed 54 democracies across the world, they found the United States to be the least impartial. Senator DuPaul, Senator Misra, Senator Yang, does that not make you feel ashamed? Out of all the democracies, the U.S., who basically started democracy, is the least impartial? We're the worst at democracy? That's sad. But here's the other thing. In order for candidates to be known by our low-income constituents, that requires A, more negative campaigning, and B, more research on the part of our low-income constituents. But I want you to imagine a situation. You're a single mother who has 3 children and works 2 shifts. How are you going to know who to vote for? When you go into that poll, you're going to see many, many names. And now, not only do you have to say, I really like this one candidate, but you have to rank them. For people who have high incomes and have the time to research, that's fine. For the people that get ballots sent to their homes every day because they live in high-profile neighborhoods, that's fine. But it is not fine for our low-income constituents. Wait magazine told us in November of 2021 that low-income constituents work at least 8 to 10-hour shifts. And that leads to them statistically not having time to research candidates, which is why across the board, it showed that a majority of low-income constituents when surveyed didn't want ranked choice voting. When you come home from being a nurse on a 12-hour shift, you don't have time to say, is Senator Melendez better than Senator DuPaul? I'm not sure. I should probably research their policies. No, that's not how that works. When you pass this piece of legislation, you create a more unsafe world in a time that generally just cannot handle it. If you want to be realistic, you have to pass realistic policies. But you can't just say, hey, let's increase the size of our House by 150 people. And hey, let's also on top of that, put ranked choice voting. Today, it's because this is the most Texas thing that we've ever seen that you failed. Because the new word for undemocratic cannot become America.
Speech time 4:08. Questioners rise. Senator Baek.
Hey, when someone immediately campaigns at a candidate, that candidate's voter base is probably not going to be very happy, right?
Sure.
So under an RCB system, wouldn't candidates not be able to do that since they need a broader majority of
Not really.
Because
the thing is, you want to get as much as possible. You're not going to be like, I'm going to be super moderate because everyone's going to vote for me. That's not how that works.
But to get as much as possible, you need those second and third choices.
That would be logically sound if that was our political climate today. But it's obviously not. If I'm a low-income constituent and I know I really like this one policy, I want to take it
Senator
for I'm
Lawal,
going to vote for that.
both you and Representative Raoufi said that smear campaigns increase whenever you pass this legislation. If that's the case, it means more people know about more candidates. If that's the case, how is it harder for them to vote if they now have research on those candidates?
Senator, I think that you advocating for smear campaigns
I'm not
against the people in
advocating
this
for smear
legislature
campaigns.
is a bad idea.
I'm not advocating for smear campaigns, but you said the problem was that people didn't know
The
who
problem
their
is when
electors
smear
could be.
campaigns happen, we get a more polarized chamber. With more polarized chamber, we pass less
Smear
legislation for our
campaigns
very
are already
constituents.
at their max. I don't think our
Wait, so
polarization
that's not
is
Question period is elapsed. Speakers may be seated.
I think we're sharing.
Affirmation speakers rise. Senator Huang.
I think the chair will just pull my chair out. Okay? That's Representative Huang, spelled Huang for the records of the chamber and judges. That's Audrey Huang, not Audrey. Audrey Hepburn on your ballot. Alright. Me with a thumbs up. We'll row judges back there, and then feel partly so you guys are always ready if you're typing this. At the end of this debate, you today will rank our debaters from across the nation from 1 through 8. But what if you had to choose a singular candidate, a singular senator, that would win the round? If that's not the winner that you see at awards later, you'd probably feel cheated, betrayed, and lied to, just like my ex did to me. But let's break up with our broken system and pass this legislation. I'm surprised that 2.5, I guess, cycles into this debate, no one has quantified this goal of how bad the problem actually is. Currently, the constituents in my state, if they had the opportunity to speak up here, would say our policies across the board suck. But come on, let's not blame us. As the Conversation in 2022 reports, since 1913, the number of the seats in the House has remained constant, even though the nation's population has tripled. That has inherent results like lower productivity in office and less representation overall. So Senator Drubetskoy, that's why we need a larger House. That's reflected also in our approval rating. The New York Times in February 2024 reports that 1 in 5 people say they approve of Congress's, our performance, in surveys. But we who seek re-election win our races over 9 and 10 times. So it's clear that things aren't working right now. That's where we do have some common ground. But let's break down this debate and evaluate it on a couple frameworks. To win this debate so far, the affirmation needs to do 2 things. Let's do that right now. First, we need to disprove the argument that voter turnout decreases. That's what Senator Raoufi and Drubetskoy talked about. Let's give them some evidence and analysis to why that's inherently false. First, there were reports that in the 6 largest cities, after we implemented our RTB, turnout increased. The same goes for minorities. New America, a nonprofit, reported that minority groups saw the same voter turnout both before and after. There's literally no reason to negate on this piece of legislation. That's what the evidence says. But what about the analysis? When you increase the number of representatives someone has and increase the probability you see them in office, they're going to go back to that office and they're going to go back to the polls so they can see that happen again. So that argument is just fundamentally untrue about voter turnout. The second argument that Senator Ostheimer is going to come up in 20 seconds and talk about is gerrymandering. This is fundamentally false for two reasons. First, gerrymandering already happens in the status quo. Whether you pass or fail this legislation, the root of why politicians gerrymander is that they want to appeal to the extreme sides of the spectrum their drawn districts will achieve. That's not an issue this legislation perpetuates, because you might be redrawing these districts under this bill. But even if you draw them badly, the other parts of this legislation solve and are a counterbalance to something that happens anyway. So let me break down how each section of this legislation does that. Let's first debunk Senator Drubetskoy's argument that the climate drastically changes to a more extreme population. The way that ranked choice voting works is that if you get the majority of ones, you win, or it goes down to people's 2s and 3s. This just incentivizes candidates to move towards a more neutral campaigning strategy, because they need all the bases that they can get. That's what happened in the 2020 election when many people said, I don't want to vote for the lesser of two evils, I just don't want either candidate. So, by this legislation, with ranked choice voting, you increase that voter turnout because people see more people in offices that people want. That's what happens with multi-member districts as well. Under Section 2, instead of one representative representing your district, you have multiple, which means that ranked choice voting impacts the candidate's moderation is multiplied, because constituents no longer have two options, and there's more representation on all sides. It's crucial that we need to see what this bill's impact is. It's fair representation for a reason. Now, last but not least, let's talk about Section 4 of this legislation, which expands the size of the House. Senator Drubetskoy talked about this and said this is a reason to negate. Let me prove why that's false too. I gave you just a bunch of analysis on why we have more moderation of these candidates. So when we expand the size of the House, that impact is exponentially multiplied to be 600 members that are currently. Stay legal to the words of this legislation. Fairly represent our constituents. Pass.
Speech time for 10. Questioners rise. We'll go to Senator Drubetskoy.
Okay, I'm having kind of a hard time buying that people are going to see people as they want in the Senate. If I'm the first candidate, I give plurality, but the second candidate gets 90% of the votes, who gets voted in?
Okay, sure. I disagree with the premise of that question because we have board members representing one singular
Wait,
district.
this isn't a premise. That's just how ranked choice voting works. I'm just actually, I don't understand. How are you going to see someone
Right, but you're increasing the amount of district members from 1 to 3 to 5.
If there's a minority in a population and they really want someone, but everyone's voted for the third candidate, how do they see the person that they want?
Senator Marathe. Hi. Will gerrymandering stop under this legislation?
It won't stop, but it won't get worse, Senator. And it actually gets better, as I've proven to you, analysis-wise. Gerrymandering states whether or not we approve this legislation.
So gerrymandering works by moving votes around to get the most amount of their candidates in House.
I'm aware, yes.
If there's still a discrete amount of candidates in the House, why can't gerrymandering still happen?
Gerrymandering doesn't happen because when candidates have to apply their policies to a more diverse set of people and they want to be the most neutral that they can be, they won't gerrymander as much.
Questioning period has elapsed. Speakers may be seated. All negation speakers rise. Senator Marathe.
I thank the chair. Hi everyone, I'm Senator Marathe. That's spelled M-A-R-A-T-H-E. First time today. Whenever everyone is ready. Actually, whenever people are don't say anything. I still remember my first election when I turned 18 years old. It wasn't a big presidential election. I first voted in a local state senate election that I felt near and dear to my heart. And as I constantly refreshed my phone, looking to see who won, I was amazed to see that my fourth highest candidate had wait, who was my fourth highest candidate? I don't even remember anymore. Fail. Principally, fail this legislation to ensure that the people representing groups of people actually win a majority of those people's votes. Here's what Senators DuPaul, Liang, Misra, and Huang all missed about ranked choice voting. It only works if the people voting actually engage in the political system. Sure, Senator Huang, if every voter was like our esteemed panel of judges, ranked choice voting would work like a charm. But they're not. As the Pew Research Center explains, in September 2023, only 4% of U.S. adults say the political system works well right now. 100 million U.S. citizens aren't engaged in the political system right now. They don't read news. They don't learn about political candidates. And when they vote, they just click the button that says the side that everyone else believes in. What does that mean for ranked choice voting? Senator Misra tells us that it doesn't matter because people at the polls say they loved ranked choice voting. But the people willing to take a poll about how their election experience was is clearly not the majority of Americans. What happens to that majority? The Texas Public Policy Foundation tells us in October 2023 that for people who are uneducated or don't care about elections, they don't fill out the 4th, 5th, and 6th slots on ranked choice voting, either 1 at all, or 2, they just randomly select. What does that mean? Ranked choice voting works by taking the top person's candidate. If that candidate can't win, it looks at the second person's vote instead. If it gets down to the 3rd, 4th, or 5th person's vote, and they're randomly selecting, suddenly, that person isn't being involved in the voting process at all anymore. That's why the Texas Public Policy Foundation writes that ranked choice voting leads to situations where the person being elected didn't even get elected by the majority of the people in the district, because people just stopped voting at all when it got to that 5th box. Senator DuPaul, how exactly do you expect to increase trust in the government when the majority of people haven't even heard of the person representing them in their house? The Hill explains in 2023 that elections like Bush versus Gore, where the president didn't even win the majority of the popular vote, are the key reason that right now, American trust in the political system is so low. That gets even worse when we pass today, because majorities aren't what our system cares about under this legislation. But that's not the only part. Let's look at multi-member districts. Here, I'll agree with the affirmation. They do decrease gerrymandering, but by no means do they actually get rid of it. Senators DuPaul and Liang both championed multi-member districts as a key way to get rid of gerrymandering. But here's what actually happens. Right now, gerrymandering works to make sure that 51% of Republicans in an area can vote on one representative, making sure that representative gets into court. Now, if we take a multi-member district of 5 members, 80% of that district has to be Republicans, meaning they can still gerrymander the district to make sure those 20% of voters are somewhere that can still get them votes. That's why the Cornell Chronicle explains on September of 2022 that while multi-member districts can blunt gerrymandering, by no means do they stop it. Because at the end of the day, at the House and Senate level, it's always a simple majority that matters. Whether it's 1 more Republican vote or 10 more Republican votes, the Republicans will still win either way at the end of today's debate. Think about the failures of ranked choice voting. Think about the sanctity of our political system.
Thank you, Senator. Speech time 412. Questioners rise. We'll first go to Senator DuPaul.
Right. Debate is a comparative. Have you found any examples or evidence that ranked choice voting is worse than the status quo?
Yes, because under ranked choice voting, the majority isn't what matters.
Right, I understand the logical order. Have we seen any example or past precedent?
Yes, when ranked choice voting is implemented, oftentimes the person that won the election is not the in states like Alaska representative.
We saw actually polarization decrease and proportional representation increase in
polarization and whether the majority candidate is winning are different things.
Hi, Senator. So let's just say people don't have trust in the government. How is that trust, like deep-kind trust, not tied to how people don't see the people they want in office?
That's what I'm saying. People don't see the person they want in office even
Right.
more under this legislation because they haven't even heard of them.
You're telling me that when we triple the amount of representatives they have in their district, they're not more likely to see that person in office?
No, they're more likely to see someone they've never even heard of in the first place.
But
because
they're
they don't
ranking
even
the people they want to see in office. They're
yeah,
more
and when they
likely
get to their third
statistically
slot,
have
most
people in them.
Americans haven't even heard of
Questioning
them.
period has elapsed. Speakers may be seated. Just a quick note, this is the second instance of going over the 410 verbal cutoff. Please don't abuse that grace period just so we're getting through as much as possible. Senator Huang is in a motion.
Yes, motion for personal privilege.
State.
Pastor.
Granted. All affirmation speakers rise. We'll go to Senator Lawal.
I thank the chair. This is Senator Lawal, spelled L-A-W-A-L. Once again, spelled L-A-W-A-L. The judges are good to go. I'll go ahead and get started. 10 years ago, Fadhil Lawal walked into his house and yelled, "I just voted." 10 days ago, when I asked my father what he thought about the upcoming election, he said, "It doesn't matter. My vote won't make a difference." For the millions of our constituents who believe that their vote doesn't make a difference, pass this legislation and make a difference for them. Pass this legislation to make every vote matter. But Representative Raoufi and Representative Drubetskoy tell you that inherently ranked choice voting does the exact opposite. It weakens the vote because people don't know how to vote. Representative Raoufi cites Maine. That's true, but that's only because the government of Maine didn't do a good enough job implementing it. State Line explains in October 2018 that the reason why Maine lost ballots was because the government didn't go around telling people that they were A, switching the status of their voting, and B, informing people of how exactly they were going to do this ranked choice voting. Look to New York, where they did the exact same thing, but actually told people how ranked choice voting worked. We didn't lose the amount of ballots that they're talking about in Maine, because New York finally used the right types of jurisdictions when they were explaining to their people how ranked choice voting works. They had ads in the newspapers, they had ads on TV, and they had physical people in the building to make sure that if people had any questions as to what exactly they're doing, they get an answer. Then, Representative Drubetskoy and Raoufi tell you that it worsens polarization because now there's more campaigning being done. I agree that more campaigning gets done, but I don't agree that that campaigning gets worse. In fact, I'd argue that that campaigning gets better and more moderate because now, if you know that your competitor also has a chance of being on the same seat with you, you're more likely to work with them to succeed, and it's empirically true. Ranked Vote explains in June of 2022 that in districts such as Alaska that implemented ranked choice voting, politicians who bashed each other in the news did not get seats. In fact, it was the one politician who decided to endorse other candidates that won the first majority. Things change when politicians work together. It benefits our entire nation, and under ranked choice voting, it benefits them as well. Then, Senator Marathe comes up here and tells us that gerrymandering isn't stopped the minute you pass this legislation. I'd argue the exact opposite. Let me prove why ranked choice voting, in combination with multi-member districts, makes the difference. In the status quo, gerrymandering is ruining the American vote. The Center for American Progress explains in October 2019, the unfairly drawn districts shifted on average 59 seats during the 2012, 2014, and 2016 elections. Those seats might not sound like a lot, but when every single one of the ballots passed by those senators and those representatives could mean the difference between the way you and I live our lives, they make a difference. Which is why, when you implement this legislation, in Section 2, we add multi-member districts, which means that big districts that serve tens of thousands of people don't just get one person to represent them, but instead, multiple. But that also works on the flip side, because it means that if you don't get 90% of the votes, you still have a chance of winning. In fact, Ranked Vote quantifies in November 2021 that in multi-member districts with 5 people representing them, you only have to win 17% of the votes to actually get a seat, which means minority parties can win, independent parties can win, anyone can win as long as you're good enough for the people you represent. Gerrymandering is abolished. Our people are represented, and they're finally given an opportunity to show their love for our country. The joint research study done on an impact of RCV and in conjunction with multi-member districts found that in gerrymandered districts, implementing RCV with multi-member districts could reduce gerrymandering by up to 94% for our people to pass.
Thank you, Senator. Speech time 411. Questioners, please rise. We go first to Senator Burnside.
Thank you. So as now, in my home state of North Carolina, there's more Republicans in one district
Why wouldn't that just increase the likelihood that gerrymandering becomes even worse?
Gerrymandering is not occurring in that district because there's already so many conflicts. Hold on.
Right.
Gerrymandering only,
It's
hold on,
just
please let me
worse.
explain. Gerrymandering only occurs in competitive districts. In districts that are not
No, it
competitive.
doesn't. In my home state of North Carolina, it's overwhelmingly Republican. They still gerrymander.
Why would you gerrymander a district that you already know you're going to win?
I don't know. I'm not a North Carolina
They
Republican.
don't.
But
They
it-
only gerrymander
Senator
competitive
Ashley.
districts.
Yes, Representative. So let's talk about the current status of politicians. Are they overworked or overburdened in the status quo?
It depends on the state.
Most states are.
No, I'd agree. I'd say the exact opposite. No state has the incentive to make the voting places worse than the first politicians.
That's not where I was going with this. If they're overburdened in the status quo and we increase voter turnout, how are they not going to be overburdened in the status quo?
But voter turnout is always a good thing. If voter turnout increases, it forces
If they're overburdened and don't have the ability to count those votes in a
the
good
government
time.
have no jobs.
Question period. The last speakers may be seated. So thank you for letting me preside for you all. That's Senator Good luck to everyone for the rest of the round. And now I'm handing it off to Senator Maher.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Representative Maher, Maher. First off, thank you so much for having me as your presiding officer for today's session. I'm really honored to be your PO. First things first, congratulations on making it to TOC finals. That's an awesome achievement. You should be incredibly proud of yourself, and that's really cool. I'd like to get started with this debate as quickly as possible, so I'm just going to jump straight into my procedures and a little bit of details about today's topic. First, the link to my tinyURL spreadsheet is pretty simple. tinyurl.com/MayorTOC. Once again, tiny, T-I-N-Y, url.com/Mayor, M-A-H-E-R, T-O-C. It's all lowercase without a punctuation. Does everyone have access to that? Perfect. Okay, I see a considerable number of people on the document, so I'm going to get started with my procedures. So it's the same thing as the last presiding officer for speeches. It's going to be 1 tap at 3 minutes elapsed, 2 taps at 3 minutes and 30 seconds elapsed, 3 taps at 3 minutes and 55 seconds elapsed. And as we just established, from 4 minutes, I'll be tapping down, getting progressively louder and louder until 4 minutes and 10 seconds, but also verbally cut you off. Please try not to use that grace period. Not really fun for either of us. And then for questioning, pretty simple again. 1 tap, 20 seconds elapsed. 2 taps, 30 seconds elapsed. If I don't want those procedures modified, just let me know, but I think those should be pretty standard in these procedures. Now, how I choose speakers and questioners is pretty straightforward. I'm going to be continuing to use a preset recency list that representatives can already use, just to make sure that we have continuity in today's debate. I'll be choosing based off of precedence and recency, which you can also see second page of my board documents. Now, we'll continue debate in 1 second, but I know that you'll be seeing a lot of videos today, and I just want to emphasize one policy that I think is really important to me in particular. Now, I base a lot of my policies around equity, and on the second page of my PO documents, I have an equity form that's available for everyone in this chamber to fill out. It's really simple. Just if you have any issues or sensitive content you think could be potentially triggering, I'd appreciate that if you feel comfortable, you'd like that to be known to the chamber. If you would like to make that known, just make sure that everyone's comfortable and safe to be around. I want to make sure that everyone has the availability and confidence level to be able to speak comfortably and safe to debate around. And as we want to make debate more equitable for all, just one final note on that. In terms of trigger warnings, just please include a trigger warning if you think anything is going to be sensitive in safe debate round. Is that a mistake? It's just a quick point of inquiry.
Sure. Your equity form says it can only be viewed by people in your owners organization.
Oh, so sorry. I'll fix that once. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. The link is tinyurl.com/Mayor TOC.
And then just finally, one quick note. I'll be moving pretty quickly through my procedures in today's debate round. I know we had a lot of recesses in the first part of today's debate round. So if you have any questions about my procedures, about today's round or speaking, when you're going to be able to get to speak, please just feel free to point of inquiry me or ask me at any point in time, because I want to make sure that there's all sorts of clarity about today's debate round. So with that, are there any motions or any questions about my procedures? All right, seeing and hearing none, we'll continue debates really quickly on our bill. So we end on using the affirmation for Representative Lawal. Any non-negation speakers, please rise. And Representative Huang, Burnside, that goes to Representative Lung.
Thank you. That's Senator Lung, spelled L-U-N-G. Just like the organ used to breathe, but that's easier for my judges. It's Hal Lam Lung, so that's with an H. That's easier for you to find. A lot of judges, give me a holler if you aren't ready, and I'll just get started. In congressional debate, if your chamber has ever effectively passed a policy, your PO has likely made the joke, we're already more efficient than the real Congress. But after the docket nomination fiasco of this morning, I don't think we can make that claim. In order for this legislation to pass, the affirmative needs to prove to you that this system of policies works together to decrease polarization and improve efficiency. I don't think anyone's been able to do that in this round. 5 cycles into this debate, you still fail because no senator on either side has treated every policy and shown you how they work together. They show you how RCV works in some states, but not how that interacts with multi-member districting. Allow me to show how these work together to worsen our system in this speech. First, I want to disprove ranked choice voting solvency by directly disproving Senator Misra and DuPaul's Alaska empiric about how Alaska used ranked choice voting to decrease polarization. Senator Misra and DuPaul look at this way too generically. They say just because we implemented ranked choice voting, people had elected more moderate candidates. But let's look at why they didn't elect the extremist candidates. The 2 extremist candidates were Sarah Palin and Tor Shibaka. Let's look at what their policies actually were. The New York Times writes in June of 2021 that Shibaka openly supports conversion therapy. Okay, yeah, we're not off to a great start. The Guardian furthers in December of 2021. Sarah Palin said she would only get vaccinations over her dead body. Well, sorry to burst your bubble, Sarah, but when you don't get vaccinations, that's how you end up with a dead body. So, Senator Misra and DuPaul, your arguments are predicated on an anti-vaxxer and a homophobe losing an election solely because of RCV. I don't think that's true. I think that's because voters actually have a brain. But second, let's move on to section 2 and 3, which is multi-member districting and increasing the number of representatives, and how ranked choice voting in conjunction with these uniquely makes it worse. Let's move on to this idea that we're competing for more seats because of multi-member districting. Senator Raoufi on my own side gives you the perfect 4 minutes of analysis to prove how, in order to stand out among more candidates, you need to pay for more political campaigning, because people won't vote for you if they don't even know who you are. Now, I disagree with Senator Drubetskoy's warranty that they're going to use the extremes to attract candidates. What you're going to do is you put your other competition down, so they're the 4 or the 5 on your opponent's ballot, rather, and you can gain the 1. Now, you can believe Senator Lawal's warranty all you want, but let's trust the data here. Empirically, MIT Election Lab finds in 2021 on a study conducted on all of Maine's congressional elections, which used ranked choice voting, it was actually more negative after they implemented ranked choice voting. Senator Lawal and Marathe, maybe you're right. Smear campaigning and campaigning in general does educate voters more about who they're voting for. If these campaigns are more negative, do they really want to know that about their candidates? That's why they're there. Don't increase polarization after you pass. This is only going to worsen Congress's worst issue right now. The reason why Congress is so inefficient right now is because we're polarized and we can't compromise. That's why weapon shipments to protect millions of innocent Ukrainians are being delayed every second. That's why we couldn't decide on docket nominations this morning with a perfect 8-8 split. That's also why we almost had a government shutdown last June, and NBC quantified in September of 2023 that 4 million government workers wouldn't have been able to get their paychecks for. Now, I disagree with the affirmative assumption that voter turnout is inherently good. But we see more negative campaigning, and that's what's leading to voter turnout. That's not a good thing. If a voter goes to the booths because they saw a campaign that said, build a wall, that's not good. That just encouraged somebody to perpetuate hateful speech against immigrants. We live in a world where you can stage an insurrection, kill 4 police officers, injure another 140, and people will still vote for you. We live in a world where you can spread conspiracy theories, blame it on an ethnicity, and make people who look like me scared to go outside. I'm scared to live in a world like that.
Thank you. You have 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Questioner tries. First, Representative Lawal.
Hey, I don't get it. If Trump is so polarized right now, it's because there's no other option, right? It's either him or President.
This bill doesn't really address the presidential election.
Okay, but even then, if polarization is so bad, it's only because there's 2 candidates that are super polarized. If you introduce more moderate candidates,
right.
Isn't
What
that
you're arguing to me right now is polarization is bad in the status quo. Everybody can agree. What I argued to you for the last 4 minutes is that polarization gets worse, which I proved to you with a study from Maine that was conducted on every single ad ran in their congressional election.
Senator Lawal told you in Maine it was because there was improper electoral regulation.
Why do people like Sarah get voted in the first place?
I think she saw a dramatic decrease in support after she supported.
Right, so less voter turnout, right?
No, I'm saying people voted for her after she made those policy decisions.
Okay, is polarization inherently always bad?
I think if both sides are advocating for things that aren't inherently hateful, then,
Okay,
it's not
let's
bad.
say, for example,
But it is inherently
back in the
bad.
1960s, was the Civil Rights Act a polarized policy?
It absolutely was.
Right, and it was inherently good.
But
if we can increase voter turnout in progressive
you can't draw the same comparative with the same things today.
Absolutely. Rocks. Representative Baek.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. For the representatives of this chamber, this is Senator Breck, spelled B-A-E-K. Once again, Senator Breck speaking for the first time in this legislative session. I know there's a lot of constituents watching today's round, so I'll just keep it quick. Let me know if you aren't ready. Give me a holler. Great. Ben Stapleton was a lawyer, member of Denver, Colorado, and a full-fledged member of the Ku Klux Klan. He won the mayoral election because, well, the 1930s were a different time. There was enough racism and bigotry to empower his narrow electoral victory. That changed when Denver became one of the first states in America to establish ranked choice voting. Racism was no longer enough, as the system required widespread support. It benefited Denver in 1931, and it will benefit the United States in 2024. Now, I think all of us have been as confused in today's debate as the negation thinks our constituents will be when we have to rank candidates. So let's boil it down into the two biggest arguments. The negation advocacy surrounds voter exhaustion and the idea of gerrymandering. I want to dismantle both of them. First, Senator Raoufi, Drubetskoy, and Marathe all say that information disparities will create voter exhaustion. I have two responses. The first point is that our current system is even worse. As Fair Vote magazine finds in 2020, ranked ballots actually produce less exhausted votes than our current winner-takes-all system. And Senator Drubetskoy, that number was even higher for minority genders and races. My second argument is that this information disparity is easily solvable. All we need to do, Senator Marathe, is increase education programs. But don't just take it from me, because a study conducted by UC Davis found that in New York elections, when ranked choice polls simply offered voting guides, voter exhaustion decreased by 15.7%. Americans aren't ignorant. Americans aren't incompetent. All they need is a government that supports them. But second, I want to address the negation's arguments about gerrymandering, because inherently they are fundamentally non-unique. As the Los Angeles Loyola finds in June of 2023, 72% of Americans are already vulnerable and affected by gerrymandering. What this means is that we shouldn't just fail a legislation because of a problem that already exists. So that's why we shouldn't negate this legislation. But what's the reason we should pass? Well, the most important question in today's round has been whether today's legislation will increase government efficiency. Senator Lawal, I want to fill your burden and end this debate once and for all. Now, Senator Drubetskoy already told you that our government is pretty polarized, but she never explained to you why. As the New York Times explains on September 23rd of 2023, right now, a block of 20 hyper-partisan legislators is slowing down the House so much that they can hardly get anything done. But the reason they're still elected is because they rely on extremist voters in their districts who keep voting them in. But when you pass today's legislation, you change that system once and for all. Senator Lawal already told you that people who are negatively campaigning don't get elected. But I think the more important question is what happens to people that actually do. As Vanderbilt University finds in February of 2021, representatives who captured bipartisan support were 10% more likely to pass legislation that actually supports and comes into law. Even further, a study conducted by Fair Vote in Maine found that these voters who decreased negative campaigning and had RCV had a 19% higher chance of having bipartisan cooperation in these elections. Senator Lawal, this disproves your point that we're suddenly not going to be able to stay efficient. The only thing that today's legislation does is ensure we have a check for our government. Because if you want your policy goals to become reality, everyone needs to sit at the table. The only thing that today's legislation mandates is that everyone has to take a seat. In 1931, ranked choice voting benefited Denver. Today, it will save America.
Thank you. Speech time of 4 minutes, 6 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes, 6 seconds. Pushers, rise.
Baek, I agree your side has given very strong examples of when RCB has worked. Yeah. Does it still work when it has to work in conjunction with multi-member districting and expanding? It actually becomes even more effective because when you increase district sizes, there's more opinions you have to account for. Wait, no, that's not true, right? Because it decreases the local representation that you actually have. Like when you have more larger districts, you get rid of these small extremist districts that are electing hyper-partisan legislators. All right, so does ranked choice voting in the past, can you provide an empirical? Yeah, I provided you an empirical. No, with multi-member districting. Okay, obviously that system hasn't been implemented, but that...
Hi, Senator. Ranked choice voting is ineffective in some states because there's a lack of education, right?
Not in the ones that have been educated.
What's the guarantee that when you implement it nationally, all of a sudden this education is accessible?
This Congress?
Okay, is it in this legislation?
We have the power under the Constitution to provide...
My question is, where is the guarantee?
The Constitution.
That we will enact a bill like that.
You and me.
If there's no guarantee, and we prove that this is polarization in this Congress,
there's no polarization if we implement education.
You say the burden is that there's a lack of education. If there's no guarantee that we provide it,
we are supposed to build that burden.
Thank the chair. Thank you. Thank the speaker. Rise. Ostheimer.
I thank the chair. Hello, everyone. My name is Senator Nicholas Ostheimer, speaking for the first time today in the negation of the Fair Representation Act. Judges and PO, please give me a heads up if you're not ready. Otherwise, I'll get the show on the road. My 7th grade science teacher, Mr. Fight, didn't believe in evolution, climate change, or dinosaurs. So he ran for Congress to finally put an end to all these woke conspiracy theories to corrupt America. He didn't win. But hey, this was Florida. He got third place. Failed, because this bill enables representatives like Mr. Fight to form a chaos coalition, forcing government shutdown and stopping all progress. Senator DuPaul proves that this bill rewards ideological and partisan diversity. Senator Raoufi proves that this bill increases extremism by putting voters' fifth choices into office. They're both right. That allows people like Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, or Mr. Fight to get into Congress. Because, Senator Misra, according to a 2024 Gallup poll, 43% of voters identify as independent and are unhappy with both parties. Senator Drubetskoy and Huang claim that polarization slows congressional action. But they don't explain how this bill affects behavior in Congress, not just in elections. Let me one-up them. This bill ends progress, full stop. This bill leads to an ideologically diverse yet polarized group of hundreds of independents and third-party representatives in Congress. They take away enough seats from both parties that neither can form a majority ever again. Sounds fine, right? Absolutely not. Once in Congress, the Chaos Coalition is united by nothing except obstructionism. Since the Chaos Coalition can only succeed politically by stopping progress, Congress can't do anything. And yes, believe me, it can get worse. This Congress clearly doesn't negotiate in good faith. After all, Senators Raoufi, Misra, and Huang have all been throwing darts at my question about gerrymandering when that isn't even my argument. But hey, at least we negotiate in the first place. Researchers at the University of Notre Dame in 2023 examined 84 presidential regimes across the world. When their Congress had no single-party majority, 88% of those cases faced government deadlock or shutdowns because small parties refused to form coalitions. Why? They're never big enough to pass policy, but they're big enough to stop it. It's the only way they can satisfy their fringe voters to get elected as a fourth or fifth choice in the first place. It's what they will do because it's the only thing they can do. So Senator Beck wants to make this Congress more efficient. The exact opposite happens. Senator Beck, a house divided against itself will not stand. And if you pass, it won't. Irresolvable congressional gridlock causes government shutdown because it's not in the Chaos Coalition's interest to compromise. Bobby Kogan, the Senior Director for Federal Budget Policy at the Center for American Progress, warned on September 29th of 2023 that federal agencies will force 2.1 million Americans to work without pay or shut down. The SNAP program, which protects 40 million low-income Americans from food insecurity, will shut down. Dozens of programs, from housing assistance loans for Native Americans to legal advocacy for veterans, will shut down. Senators Misra, DuPaul, and Lawal, the normal Americans you want to grant representation, are hurt the most when this bill shuts down life-saving services. Senator Lawal, another POC or woman representative in Congress, cannot help millions of POC or women voters if they can't actually pass policy. Representation is about more than placing people into House seats. It's about actual progress. A chaos coalition consisting of representatives like Mr. Fight can deny federal workers payment, deny single mothers food stamps, and deny the entire nation desperately needed progress. Senator Beck, that is tyranny by the minority. Don't promote Mr. Fight, from crazy climate change conspiracist to congressman.
Thank you. In terms of exactly 4 minutes. Once again, in terms of exactly 4 minutes. Commissioners rise. Sir, yeah.
What's the warrant behind those programs specifically being cut?
Because those shut down when the federal government shuts down.
Okay, why would the federal government shut down in this case?
Because the Chaos Coalition will not compromise on a budget.
Chaos Coalition will not compromise on a budget.
Yes.
Why does it matter in this case, and why is ranked choice voting specifically like that?
Because ranked choice voting in multi-member districts are why the Chaos Coalition gets into power in the first place, and they are not incentivized to pass
why
the
would we
budget.
just cut all of these programs just because, like, some coalition is going to shut down?
Because you won't have a majority to pass the budget.
Okay, so why are all multi-member districts so much more likely to have these polarizations?
Exactly because Senator Raoufi warranted that they are going to get third, fourth, and fifth choice representatives into office. They don't have to appeal to the majority.
Become larger. That means there's a larger group of opinions that are represented when determining elections, right?
I mean, a lot of Americans are extreme.
A
When
lot
it
of
comes
times,
down to the fourth and
a
fifth
lot of
votes, they
times
will elect extremists.
But a lot of times extremism is in pockets, correct? So when you expand them, it's diluted, right?
Those pockets alone are big enough to get a fifth choice into office.
No, but when districts are large enough.
I thank the chair.
Absolutely. Rise.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, my name is Senator Burnside, spelled B-U-R-N-S-E-T. Excited to be speaking for the first time today. I'm going to give a few seconds. I know we have a lot of people, but just give me a holler if you're not ready, and then I'll go ahead and get it. I'm going to wait for some people to speak. Okay, great. Thank you. As members of this Congress, we like to call ourselves defenders of democracy and fighters of freedom. But we're really more culpable than we'd like to admit. Often, we tend to just pass policies that only maintain the freedom of those who already have it, and ignore those who don't. But it's about time this Congress stood up for those who are constantly ignored, passed this policy today to finally bring a voice to this people. Senators Drubetskoy, Marathe, Raoufi, and Ostheimer on the negation have literally all told you that these ranked choice voting systems are unfair because candidates become more extremist since voters go uninformed. So let's actually talk about voter education for once. I asked the negation, which world sounds more democratic to you? One in which candidates literally never engage with their constituency, or one in which voters are literally given any information on a candidate's platform because they're actually interested in earning people's votes? Yeah, it's obviously the second one. In the negation world, candidates don't engage in civil campaigning at all and leave their voters without a voice. This means that for many candidates that are already well known, they don't have to win support of their base. CNN wrote in July of 2022 that because of the current plurality vote system, all the candidate has to do to be nominated from the party is to win 30% of their vote. Why? They can just get money from party leaders. Brookings wrote in July of 2021 that in competitive races right now, candidates focus on earning monetary support from party bigwigs and factional leaders who in 2020 primaries averaged the most money towards extremist candidates. The problem is, voters are usually never educated on candidates' backgrounds because they're not campaigned to it all right now.
a Harvard study found in August of 2018 that voters are only 1% better than chance of choosing a representative that actually values or aligns with their views. The Negation tries to tell you this bill is any less democratic than the status quo, but that's based on an assumption there's a democracy in the first place. It's about time. We're seeing the majority of valuable American voices not being heard or informed, that we change the status quo right now. That's a false assumption made by the Negation that there's democracy in the status quo. But here's why our potential for democracy is finally unlocked when you pass this piece of legislation. You increase the candidate engagement with a wider demographic, because with the ranked choice voting system, candidates like Representatives Ostheimer, conspiracy theorist teacher, have to actually connect with voters and align with their policies to win with increased election competition in a bigger primary. And also, they actually start to value the second or third choice rank spot with multi-member districts. The Washington Post wrote in October of 2022 that a ranked choice voting system, like Alaska and Maine, candidates had to actually reach beyond their base to become the second and third choices in that system. When you pass, you bolster our democracy once and for all by finally ensuring everyone has a voice in elections. Senator Long, I'd argue any campaigning, no matter how negative, is better than literally no campaigning at all. We can finally have our constituents putting food on the table because people that are in office finally care about them. You see one main impact when you pass. When candidates increase their voter engagement, they take more moderate stances, limiting misinformation. The Washington Post wrote in August of 2022 that in 2020, 36% of news shared by Republican candidates came from unreliable sources, compared to only 2% of news shared by more moderate Republican candidates. Here's what this bill means for the average American. It means they can finally get policies passed by people they care about, by people that care about them. It means they're no longer alone. It means they're no longer ignored. I want the Negation to justify why my constituents can't have that. Pass.
Thank you. Speech time 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes and 9 seconds. Listeners, rise. Between those standing, that goes to Representative. That'll go to Representative Ostheimer.
Hey, do politicians like Mr. Fight engage voters by live streaming C-SPAN? No. That engagement is polarizing, extreme, and lying. Why does voter engagement necessarily improve voter education?
They have to actually tell voters what their policies are in order to get in office. No one is going to vote for someone they disagree with their policies.
I'm not going to lie, Fifth of Florida voters probably do not believe that climate change is man-made. Why does that mean that we can't win
vote for someone that they agree with the policy?
There's nothing wrong. You and Senator Lawal both got Alaska. Do you know that which spot that candidate got, like out of the rank vote?
I'm guessing a lower spot?
Yeah. So why does that guarantee that he's A, more moderate, and B, like you said, cares about his constituents?
Because they actually, now they actually have to reach out to people in order to get the second or third.
I don't have to reach out to someone in order to get the third spot. I just have to make sure
the primaries are larger. So in order to get a second or third spot, they have to
education that this bill doesn't
there's increased competition, which means people have to buy the vote. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you. Next speaker, rise. Con. That's in that range too. Oh, but you already. Yeah, I'm sorry. Already.
I thank the chair. That's Senator Khan, spelled K-H-A-N. Let me know if you're not ready. I take my job as a congressman very seriously. But let me be real with you. I'm humble. And I know I'm only here because of my boy, Senator DuPaul, budging the gerrymandering line to me so that I could get elected. Today's debate makes gerrymandering worse in an affirmative world. That's the sole reason you're failing. Now, I want to give some much-needed context to today's round. This Fair Representation Act is a real bill in real Congress. Except our version today is missing one thing. The actual bill forms an independent commission of 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, and 5 independents to redraw the district line. That's to avoid political gerrymandering. Because now you have 3 opposing parties fighting, making it equal. Today's legislation does nothing like that. The only thing it does is say that every single district has to have about the same population. But Census Gov tells us that's the same thing we have right now. And that's the same thing every single negative representative today has told you has led to this gerrymandering. Today's legislation has no regulation to stop gerrymandering. But how does it worsen it? Because in today's debate, we've heard a lot. Affirmation senators from DuPaul to Liang to Misra to Lawal to Baek tell you 2 things. Either A, gerrymandering gets better when you affirm, or B, it's non-unique and exists in both worlds. Even people on my side, like Senator Marathe, concede to this point, telling you that it stays the same. I want to be the first to say it actively gets worse. Think about it logically. The affirmation today, like Senator Lawal, championed the fact that you only need 17% of the vote to win in an affirmative world. They forget about the part that as soon as you hit 50% of the vote, you automatically win. Let's say today's bill's passed, right? Okay? I would probably find myself gerrymandering a little bit. Here's what I would do. I would take 3 people from my party, draw a district that is majorly that party, and then all 3 of those people, if those people in the district have more than 50% of the vote, would all get elected. That's how ranked choice voting works. And when you pass this legislation, now instead of me gerrymandering being able to sit 1 seat, I can do 3 to 5 seats at a time just by drawing district lines. But wait, doesn't the affirmation from Senator DuPaul to Misra to Liang all give examples of ranked choice voting working and fighting against gerrymandering? No, because every example that they gave had its own unique stipulation that prevented gerrymandering. Senator Liang gave California. California has their own state independent commission that draws lines so that people can't gerrymander. Senator Misra talks about Alaska. First of all, quick show of hands. Who here is from Alaska? That's what I thought. It doesn't exist. But even if you say that it does, it still wouldn't work. Because inside of Alaska, there's only 1 district. 1 person can get elected. You can't gerrymander on 1 election. Being the first person in today's debate to actually address the fact that gerrymandering gets worse wins this debate for the negative side. But fine, let's say you didn't believe anything I just said, and you actually believe Alaska exists. You still negate because Senators Drew, Huang, and Ostheimer on my side all prove to you that the efficiency of Congress fails. That's the other biggest impact of today's debate. Here's what you're weighing. A chance at Congress inefficiency failing, or a chance that we lessen the voices being heard of our Americans against nothing. Both impacts of the affirmation have been flipped to our side. Vote in the negative. Preserve American democracy. Fail.
Thank you. Speech time of 3 minutes, 57 seconds. Once again, 3 minutes, 57 seconds. Questioners rise. Misra.
Besides Alaska, which may or may not exist, I also proved to you that Maine had less partisanship, right?
Why should you look at Maine's rules right now? They literally have ranked choice voting banned, right?
No, they have statewide ranked choice voting.
That's okay. Look at their actual rules online. They have their own ranked choice voting rules, right?
Right.
So how is the federal regulations under this bill providing those same set of rules?
Ranked choice voting. Yes or no, does Maine have an independent voting commission?
I'm not sure.
No, they don't have an independent.
But they have their own ranked choice voting rules that have
so
further considerations that this bill doesn't provide.
Gerrymandering only occurs in districts that are extremely competitive, correct?
No.
Wait, why would you
Burnside really do that? In North Carolina,
she just said no. Why would you gerrymander a district that you know you're going to win?
Well, in the event of ranked choice voting, right?
No.
You don't know you're going to win unless you make it absolutely
clear. No, there are some districts in the United States that are completely red or completely blue. Why would you gerrymander those districts? You don't. You only gerrymander districts that are competitive.
Right, so if ranked choice voting, they all become competitive, so you gerrymander all of them.
That's not true.
How?
Thank you. Speaker question may be seated.
I think we share.
Thank you. Also, just to let everyone know, the content warning form should now be working. If you would still like to access that, if not, we'll give it to you. Not necessary. Now, speaks for negation, all remaining speakers. Melendez.
I thank the chair.
Yeah, it's been a really long round. Can you remind me of the count?
Yeah, of course. So it's 1 tap at 3 minutes, 2 taps, 3 minutes 30 seconds, 3 taps, 3:55, then at 4 minutes, all they get knocking down and progressively back. Same procedure as normal, just back.
Thank you. All right, judges, if you haven't passed adequate exhaustion already, just let me know if you're here, okay? Are we all good? Good. Oh, Representative Melendez. Cristopher Melendez. During the Civil War, people campaigned and protested for the rights of minorities as they were in front of the crossfires of people threatening to silence their voices to try and ensure they weren't heard. This happened during the Civil War. Wait, that's not right. This isn't a historical example that happened 160 years ago. This happened last year in Delaware. Even after the 15th Amendment was passed and minorities were granted the right to vote, America has yet to listen to them. And a civil war that divided us still rages on. Pass today's legislation to be the generation to finally end it. But let's understand how today's legislation has been too focused on historical precedent. I say we create it with today's round. I'm going to start that by doing something that Congress has usually never done. Agree with the other side. Let's look at Representative Raoufi, which told us that voter turnout decreases in the short term. I inherently agree. The Negation medicals at San Francisco University explains in 2016 that in the first few years, voter turnout decreases by 8 percentage points because of the lack of understanding of the system. But inherently, the ranked choice voting system then gets more comprehensive as time passes on. So inherently, the negative has an impact of the short term. But why is it more important to prioritize the long term? And that's why you vote in the affirmation. Let's look to 538, which explains on October 26th of 2022 that between 35 and 60% don't cast a vote in the first place because they feel like their vote won't matter. This number disproportionately affects younger voters. Ranked choice voting now forces the government to take into account every single voter whenever it comes to any kind of averaging system, rather than the status quo, where the bottom that isn't the majority just gets dropped. But why is voter turnout so important? Apart from what the affirmative has already been saying, that it can fix gerrymandering, it can ensure that it puts pressure on politicians. But this has been heard from everyone from both sides, but in two specific ways. Either moderates become moderate, or there's more polarization. Let's look at both and tell you why that happens in either world in the affirmative. Representative Marathe tells us that the middle candidates win the election, but voters inherently don't want them to be the ones who win. That's why they just simply won't vote. I disagree entirely with that premise. Let's look at the Hill, which explains on January 31st of 2023, 2/5 of Americans identified as independent, and if somehow they created a political party, they would be the strongest in the United States. So don't believe Representative Ostheimer when he tells you that independents don't have power in our election system. The problem is they're not pushed to vote. The big affirmation that is being pushed today is that the people in this room can fix the rift created by political polarization. But as well, I want to go ahead and move away from the idea that all polarization is bad. If anything, whenever you increase voter turnout of those that are not showing up in the first place, Representative Lung, it can ensure we promote radical, progressive policy. The Pew Research Center explains on May 14th of 2020 that roughly 43% of young voters are the ones that are not showing up in the first place. They're the ones who support radical, progressive policies that can ensure we combat climate change and systemic racism. Whenever you pass today's policy, you incentivize them to come to the voting booth. And candidates have to cater to their views as well, instead of just simply ignoring them, because they feel like their vote doesn't matter. I'm tired of continuing a civil war that should have ended 160 years ago. When will it be enough? When will we stop fighting? When will we stand together?
Each time 4 minutes to 8 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes to 8 seconds. Questioner rise. The first goes to Richard Huang.
not make gerrymandering worse in the affirmative?
Okay, first things first, whenever it comes to response to gerrymandering, almost all 50 states already have gerrymandering. You can't make it inherently worse.
Well, you can make it better with an independent
Okay,
commission.
that's not a negative impact of today's policy. If there's a positive impact, that's how you should pass.
If we're adding more representatives per district, this bill says 3 to 5. How would that not make gerrymandering
we're
worse?
adding more members only proportionally to the size.
More members are in by gerrymandering.
No, that isn't what happens. It happens proportionally. So gerrymandering is
Right, people identify as independent have one homogeneous set of ideals.
No, they have a range.
If that's true, why does any of your points stand about people being independent actually
Again,
elected?
you told us that voters will simply not want the middle ground because they don't agree. I'm telling you there are voters that agree.
Today's sponsor had a very wonderful dream. Their dream was voter equality. MLK had a very similar dream. His dream is racial equality. But my dream is a world where we cooperate and work with both. Create a system which implements both of them. But today's legislation fundamentally is not the way to go. But before I even get into what I want to do, let's talk about what's been said. Because so far, the entirety of today's round has been framed under two worlds. The affirmative world, a world in where we implement ambiguous RCVs, giving each state the ability to utilize their own RCV mechanism to ensure that they can do what they need to do to better perpetuate polling predictions. This opens the door for polling taxes and other situations that make it so much harder for marginalized communities to do what they need to do. So while you have RCVs, they come at the expense of voter silence. Or the negation world, a world in where we still have RCVs in the status quo, but we don't standardize them. Here's why my world is better. So far, Representative Misra and Lawal tell us that when you pass today's legislation, voter turnout is going to go up. And while I agree, voter turnout will go up, only initially. According to the RCV section of standardized localized silencing in October of last year, Representative Lawal and Senator Mishra's advocacy for 5 polling stations make it increasingly harder for any community to get their voters to actually go to their polling stations. In the status quo, polling stations are so underfunded, so overburdened, and so understaffed that they can't even handle one election. How are they going to handle the influx of voters who now have to go and not only waste their time figuring out which rank of people they're going to vote, but how those people are going to work for them? I agree. RCVs may not necessarily be bad, but when you silence American constituents, you're not doing anything for anyone. But then, even if I take the affirmation at their absolute highest and say that we can just increase funding for these polling stations, this blanket statement, address them, how is this going to affect marginalized communities? TOC's advocacy in October of last year notes that of the 2 voting stations in Alaska that still utilize RCVs, over 35% of which had only come from white Americans, excluding the Hispanics, the Native Americans, and the Black communities that exist within that state, making it so much harder for those marginalized communities to get their voices out there. And even when they had the option of choosing between each candidate, they were not able to get anyone through. Why is that detrimental to democracy? Because it doesn't allow Americans to vote for who they want. Better yet, who can even get the job done. Voter turnout only increases initially. It won't last for the longevity of anything. Why is that crucial? Because when you pass today's legislation and you incentivize this entire blanket addressment and standardize these RCVs, you make it harder for everyone, like I keep saying. Repetition is key. My friends tell me that every day. But repetition in a cycle where we see not only abroad but within our own nation is not the key to our success. I've done a lot of talking, and I haven't really addressed a lot of the arguments brought today. So I want to talk about why today's legislation, to some, might actually be beneficial, instead of just focusing on why we should cancel it out. Today's legislation, sure, may help with unfazed voters, but at the end of the day, it limits options and silences individuals. And when you all swore an oath to protect that, you cannot pass.
Thank you. Speech time of 4 minutes, 5 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes, 5 seconds. Questioner drives. Representative Huang.
Hey, I'm a little confused. Is your only problem with this bill the problem that, like, voting centers are super overloaded and expensive?
No. My problem with this bill is that it overstates the blanket statement of RCVs, giving states the ability to just utilize which RCVs they want.
Then if RCVs are more successful in some states than
No,
others, like
they're
my
not
side
more
of the group,
successful.
why can't states just adopt those models?
But they're not more successful
Why
because
not?
voter turnout doesn't increase. It
Wait,
decreases.
you just
in the
conceded
long
that
term.
voter turnout
Initially, in the long term, you still have the same marginalized communities not being able to vote.
Wait, Senator
that
Melendez
does
already
nothing.
stated here that
DuPaul, there is actually contingent on voter disenfranchisement. Currently, the states have control over their elections and every single thing is still
Right.
Wouldn't standardizing a system work to combat that disenfranchisement because now it's not left to each municipality to state?
Sure, but when you standardize it, you still leave
Right.
room for ambiguity.
Sure, yeah.
So if you open the door for ambiguity, you don't address the
But we're
overall
not
problem of
opening the door for
standardization.
ambiguity because we're creating a federal
No,
standardized
because your
system.
federal standard only utilizes several RCVs instead of using one RCV.
I thank the President. Good morning, everyone. That's Senator Katuria speaking for the first time in today's legislative session, and I believe I am your last speaker on this legislation. That's Kathuria, Rohan Katuria. Give me a holler if you're not ready. Perfect. I think we've learned that if anything, America isn't a landmass, it isn't a flag, it isn't a people. America is a promise. So no matter where you come from or what you look like, your opinion matters. I'm tired of this Congress continuing to ignore the voices of our people. Please, choose to support American voices. Pass this policy. Senator Huang, Raoufi, Drubetskoy, Marathe, and the rest of the negation tell you that this legislation decreases representation. And all the way at the end of this debate, the way that my side has presented this legislation, I'd agree. They haven't gone all the way. Let's address these arguments head on. First, Senator Marathe, Drubetskoy, and a couple other people in the negation are worried that voters are too inept to understand how to rank other candidates. But fair vote, on January 9th of this year, quantify Senator Lawal's example that he gave you earlier. He told you about ads in New York. Those ads, 500,000 of them, reached 3.4 million voters. And studies saw a direct correlation between those ads and voter turnout. Voters can learn. More than that, misinformation and a lack of education is non-unique in today's debate. Senator Lawal's dad may not be that informed about politics, but after we pass this legislation and make it easier and more inviting for him to vote, maybe he'll show up at election booths. But next, everyone has ignored Senator Ostheimer's speech and his argument. I want to attack this with simple logic. He's worried about a government shutdown. We all know that a government shutdown is not contingent on any one piece of legislation, any one piece of policy that we passed in this room today. Government shutdowns are a complex problem. Don't let him scapegoat this legislation and blame it for the reason. But then, Senator Abdikadir says voter turnout is a bad thing because local municipalities won't be able to support the increased influx in voters. I just don't like this argument. I don't agree that we should, instead of funding these polls, instead decrease voter turnout or keep it at a low level because we're afraid they'll shut down. The solution to this is funding, not ignorance. Finally, I want to address Senator Lung's framework head on. He's right. Nobody on my side has actually examined how all of these pieces of today's legislation fit together. First, it does that by instead finally making sure that elections are high in quality. Senator Lung says this bill makes elections more negative. Sure, in the short term that's the case. In the long term, it's not. The Washington Post tells us in May of last year that RCV facilitates issue-driven campaigns. Logically, that makes sense. I don't want to continue bashing my opponents if it means I'm going to lose their voters. Thanks, Senator Drubetskoy. But then, Section 2 supports this assumption by ensuring that multi-member districts are instantiated, which means now more people's voices are heard from a single district. And then, Section 4 expands the House to account for these changes. In general, this makes elections more policy-driven, more fair, more friendly, and more inviting for our voters. But what does that look like? Greg Gordon for Purdue University tells us that if the 2000 election was considered more productive and more positive with its campaigning, we would have found over 4 million new voters. All of the parts of this bill work together to invite our constituents to vote. It turns our community, our election system, from toxic, corrupt, and disruptive to truthful, composed, and democratic. But how does this affect our people? When it comes to minorities, it helps them get elected. A Fairville meta-analysis tells us in 2024 that ranked choice voting, thanks to an influx in new voters, was able to increase the ability for minorities to get elected by 51%. Speak for our people. You say pass.
Thank you. Speech time of 4 minutes, 7 seconds. Once again, 4 minutes, 7 seconds. Questioners rise. That goes to Representative Abdi.
Hey, Representative, I think you mischaracterized my argument. I'm not saying that funding is the problem. I'm saying that because these organizations are so underfunded, they can't facilitate them.
I'm confused. Does that not sound like funding is the problem?
No, funding isn't the problem. It's the silencing of voters that is.
Wait, you just told me that underfunding was the problem. You just said underfunding is the reason they can't support it.
That's not the reason they can't fund it. Even if we find a way to increase funding, that still doesn't deal with the fact that voter turnout being low is not new.
My whole speech was talking about how voter turnout increases because now elections are more divided.
Hey, you showed me in your speech that you agree with me that in the short term political polarization might get worse because of more negative.
I don't think it's political polarization that gets worse. The rest of my side is giving you an
negative campaign.
Let me finish.
Of course.
You said negative campaigning. I'm saying political polarization might not necessarily get worse because now more people are attracted to the voting booths.
What you said, your argument is true. If you're able to prove that in the long term, that outweighs the short term increased polarization.
Wait, polarization is already bad in the status quo. I don't need to prove to you that it'll get worse or better. It's already extremely
bad. More negative ads and more people that vote because there's more candidates.
I think that's it.
Sure, thanks to you. Misra.
I move the previous question.
Second. Assuming unanimous consent, so ordered. Simple voting procedures. First, all voters in the affirmation, please rise. Cathuria 1, Huang 2, Misra 3, Huang 4, DuPaul 5, Melendez 6, Lawal 7, Baek 8, Burnside 9. That's 9 in the affirmation. And then any and all voters in negation. Raoufi 1, Drubetskoy 2, Abdi 3, Armaan 4, Huang 5, Marathe 6, Ostheimer 7. That's 7 in the negation. Any objections? Should be done. On a vote of 9-7-0, this bill does pass, and congratulations to the sponsor.
So now I'll quickly go over my procedures and some important things, and then we'll get started. My gaveling procedures are simple. 1 tap at 2 minutes and 11 seconds, 2 at 2 minutes and 47 seconds. No, I'm just joking, guys. Standard gaveling procedures, 1 tap at 3 minutes, 2 at 3:30, 3 at 3:55, and then 4 to 4:10, I'll be progressively gaveling down loud. So continuing, those are the speech procedures. For questioning, it's standard, 1 tap at 20 seconds, 2 at 30 seconds, and then I'll directly move on to the next question. Just standard on that end. Then, a key thing about my TOC, as you see at the bottom, there's multiple different sections. If you ever forget the procedures, they're there. Table of motions is there, so if you ever don't know what to call for, it's all there for easy action. Very simple. The final thing is the important links. One key thing there is the trigger warning form and equity form. I will be monitoring that 24/7 in this chamber so far. So anyone has anything sensitive in round, please fill it out. Call for a point of inquiry. I'll be monitoring it. It'll be great in that end. It should work. If it doesn't, please let me know. And so, yeah, with that, we can get started. So are there any motions? State that.
Whatever silver will state that. Enter chamber.
Granted. So, are there any motions? Continue debate. Senator Raoufi.
Motion to begin debate on the Consumer Online Privacy Rights.
Is there a second? Second? With that, we will move to begin debate on consumer privacy. The start time for this piece of legislation is 11:15 a.m. Are there any authors? Sponsors? Senator Drubetskoy, unopposed.
Thank you, Chair. For the second time and the final time in my debate career, I'm Senator Drubetskoy. I just want to thank everyone for giving me this space. It really means a lot. I want to thank my team. I want to thank my family. And if you're not a fan of fourth wall breaks, I'm a senator who's retiring after serving 4 consecutive terms. Just any indication, and I'll be on my way.
22,000 people signed on for free Wi-Fi, and then inadvertently agreed to 1,000 hours of community service by cleaning toilets and relieving sewage. A few years later, 22,000 more people signed on to the same free Wi-Fi link, and they agreed to give away their oldest child. It's because Rumpelstiltskin should not shape your AI world and pass my policy today. I know that they're really excited about my policy, but let me tell you why. I want you to imagine yourself in the world that's coming to you in the future. Here's the problem. We don't have a choice but to pass policy that protects you. First, you will live in a world where AI is a bigger presence than ever before. The Pew Research Center writes in June of 2023 that people think that AI will reach the point of extinction to humanity. 79% of AI experts are more scared than excited about AI as deepfakes, disinformation, crimes, and harassment online increase. And How Stuff Works on May 2021 tells you that processor speed doubles every 24 months. By 2050, we will reach something called 5 petahertz of gigabytes on a computer. If you don't know what that is, I didn't either before starting. It's because we can't even think about it in our status quo. You have to have a way to protect yourself. That's what my piece of legislation does. First, let's talk about Section B. We're going to go in reverse order. Have your data taken and stolen. There is a very good chance that you will find your data being compromised in the future. How can I protect you? Allow me to give you the solution. Statista last month told us that in the fourth quarter of 2023, 8 million records were sold to hackers from just one company. It is a very good possibility that those will be yours. Except there's something else that Statista tells us. Our government has invested $24.4 billion into our IT department. Except we kind of have nowhere to put it. That's what this piece of legislation changes. We create a borough to funnel that funding and make sure that we can actually incentivize companies to make sure that your data isn't stolen. Plus, we put regulation on that. Now your second bit. You cannot read a policy and understand it in our modern world. I honestly have never read a policy before agreeing to it in my entire life. And I'm not alone. Pew Research Center in October of 2023 tells you that 67% of Americans have little to no idea what they're agreeing to. In fact, 59% of Americans just click agree without reading the content. And I cannot blame my constituents for doing that. Because they are wordy, they are hard to read. That's where Section A of my legislation comes in. A, we have risk programs and data protection programs that we literally make to protect your data in an increasingly technological world. But B, we make sure that every website has to have a human accessible privacy policy. So you always know what you're agreeing to. I can never see how that's net harm. But at the end of the day, you have to think about the future generation. Because as we sit here, fine, maybe we won't see the 5 petahertz. But my children will, and so will yours. Which begs the question, are they safe? They're not even safe in the status quo. So I cannot see how they will be safe in 26 years. As NBC tells us in September of 2021, 3 years ago, before we had some of the protections that we have in the status quo, we found that hackers were littered with child information. Just one hacker group had taken information from 1,200 schools. From schools, from children who have no literacy on the internet and no knowledge of what they're agreeing to. This isn't just for you. It's because we don't have a choice. The negation today has the burden of proving to you that more guidelines are a bad thing. They have a burden of proving to you that by negating they can guarantee a safer world. But they can't. I won't agree to give your iPad access, but I will agree to access.
Speech time, 4 minutes and 8 seconds. With that, 4 blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please. Between those standing, the ultimate goes to Senator Burnside.
Thank you. So, do people right now have options to remove their data off platforms?
Sure. I would argue that's not easily accessible and known to the public how to do that. Our worst case scenario is literally making that an easier process.
But there's literally a delete data button on most apps. Why can't people?
Honestly, I've never just seen a delete data on any website I've ever been to. Why is it a net harm to make sure that that app and that button is easily viewable?
Because now it means that companies won't want to innovate if they're suddenly regulated.
I don't care about innovation if we keep people safe.
I do.
AI innovation
Senator Raoufi.
is a resource they need.
Hi, Senator.
Hey.
If data companies can't sell your data, but they have to give you free services, what is keeping them from bankruptcy?
Wait, I'm sorry. Are you saying that a data company should only exist if it sells consumer data?
No, but there's nothing keeping them in business if they can't sell your data to fund their
AI
services.
innovation happens in all worlds. You can absolutely be in business without selling private data.
The reason these free services are available is because they sell your data and don't charge you
You
directly.
think that there's no other way to make money as a company?
Absolutely
Put on
not.
advertisements on your website.
Absolutely not. They're targeted because they sell your data.
Senator Misra.
Let's say Amazon, right, has my email, or Google has my birthday or my phone number. How exactly does that personal information hurt me?
Right, but that's not what they're selling.
What are
They're
they
selling
selling?
your data and how much you
Like,
want to be
what
on
are they
it.
selling?
Actually,
They're selling
status
phone numbers,
quo.
they're selling
Okay,
emails.
I'd love to answer your question. In the status quo, they're making you more addicted and targeting you to things.
What are they selling?
They're selling things like your social security number. Amazon
Companies
and
are selling my
okay.
social security.
Amazon and Google
I feel
are
like
the
that's-
only websites that people go on. You don't know a lot of what happens behind the scenes because we're senators, not anti experts.
Hey, what's the reason why companies sell data right now?
It's because they want to make money.
Right. So if you remove the mechanism of making money, won't they up charges somewhere else?
Okay,
to get rid of
here's
it?
my thing. Amazon and Google have monopolies over things. You can't just say like competition like will eventually go out and everyone is now going to pay to use the Wi-Fi.
Okay.
I think our constituents would riot if they had to pay to use the
But
internet.
if Amazon wants to maintain a certain profit margin, won't they increase prices
Amazon can
somewhere
maintain a
else to
profit
do that?
margin without selling your data, I promise. Amazon is
Then
the
why are
biggest
you selling my
conglomerate we
data
have in the
right
world
now?
right now. There's no negation against making sure
With
our
that, let
constituents
the
are
speaker and question seated. Chair, thanks. Seeing that that was a speech in the affirmation, any and all negation speakers, please rise. Once again, any and all negation speakers, please rise. We do need a first negation. Senator DuPaul, unopposed.
All right. Hi, everyone. That's Senator DuPaul, spelled D-U-P-A-U-L. That's D-U-P-A-U-L. Breck DuPaul, second time today and last time at this communication already. And then driven the ML. Hate is the enemy of caution. This Congress has a tendency to pull the trigger on legislation before we actually evaluate the consequences. So today, I implore you to step back, use caution, and take a look at who the barrel of our policy is before you pull the trigger. First, negate to protect the survival, profit, and innovation of small businesses. Now, Senator Drew just asked Senator Burnside, what's the net harm of passing? Here it is. Regulatory compliance puts a financial burden on small businesses. The cost of adhering to stringent rules, like hiring a new privacy officer, and regulations coupled with the threat of criminal and civil prosecutions under Section 3A, deters innovation and entrepreneurship among small businesses. We saw this happen all across Europe. The National Bureau of Economic Research on February 26 of 2024 found that after the General Data Protection Act, a policy nearly identical to this passed in Europe, there was more than a 17% decrease in online business startups. The reason for that is compliance with regulations are incredibly expensive. The Chamber of Commerce found that on average, small businesses spend approximately $83,000 in their first year just to comply with federal regulation. When small businesses are buried under the financial burden of too much regulation, they cannot continue to innovate and employ. And that impact is felt by all Americans. The U.S. Senate Committee on Small Businesses and Entrepreneurship in 2022 found that small businesses produce more than 14 times the amount of patents of large corporations and universities. But on top of that, they employ nearly 40% of America's scientists and engineers. But their impact is far greater than just innovation. Forbes found in 2022 that small businesses are responsible for 42% of all economic activity and 65% of all growth of all job growth over the past 30 years.
and affirmative ballots reduces technological advancement and job creation. That's why it's second, Negation protects the quality and availability of online services. It's basic market principle that when there are more players in the game and more competition, products get better and prices get lower. Today's legislation destroys that. Section 1B prevents entities from processing or transferring data to a third party without explicit consent and prevents that entity from using that data in a deceptive or harmful way. That prevents targeted advertising in two ways. Firstly, the Pew Research Center in 2022 found that 3/4 of Americans would refuse to have their data sold in ads. And secondly, by requiring express consent for the use of sensitive data, we significantly limit the ability of corporations to utilize personal information for targeted advertising. But why is that so bad? Because when we remove targeted advertising for all advertising, we remove the backbone of online services. The Atlantic reports in 2023 that online services would lose 62% of all of their revenue if they were prohibited from using targeted advertising. Without the revenue boost from targeted ads, free services like online shopping, website creators, and online tools would be forced to either degrade the quality of their products or build another price barrier, preventing accessibility. Give me good judgment. So pull the trigger on this legislation. Negate.
Speech time 4 minutes and 5 seconds. With that, 4 blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please rise. Please note stating that will first go to Huang.
Hi, Senator. So are there other things other than targeted ads that companies use to make money with?
Yes, but the majority of online services are improfitable because of targeted
Right, so
advertising.
you just conceded that other things other than targeted ads which are hurting our constituents can be possible after we pass this legislation.
2 responses here. The first is that not all targeted ads are bad. Blanket policy will never solve the nuanced problem
Right,
of
but
targeted
many
ads.
of those targeted ads are bad.
And secondly, 62% of all revenue from these online services is from targeted advertising. If we
Does
remove
that apply to
they
large
fall
companies like
under.
Amazon or
Senator Beck.
So the small business that cyber attack on the downstream,
What happens to them?
oh, typically investors aren't very happy. Exactly. Small businesses often go out because of that.
And the majority of cyber attacks aren't against small businesses. They're against large corporations.
That's actually not true. A lot of the times, because of weaker cybersecurity, smaller businesses are the ones especially targeted.
Sure, but the majority of large data leaks that we see in the news aren't from your mom and pop shops.
Actually, a lot of small businesses hold a lot of data that companies and cyber attacks happen.
All right, regardless, where are we going?
I'm saying, wouldn't these companies...
Senator Lawal.
When someone decides not to put their data out there,
Yeah.
it only hurts their personalization, correct?
No, because the companies are dependent on that revenue from the data selling market to stay
No, in
profitable
terms of
provide
personalization, you said quality of service. In terms of personalization, who does it hurt? Them or the mass amount of people that use that service?
the mass amount of people because the company has less revenue to now reinvest into their business.
That's not personalization. If it's not personal to you, then it's not going to be.
When I was referring to quality, it's not personalization, it's quality.
Senator Cohen.
I'm sorry, Senator. I'm a little confused. Why are we allowing companies who are profiting off of the fact of taking advantage of the data to continue to use it? Isn't that illegal already?
No, it's not. That's why
So
we
you
get
can
$600 billion market.
So you can, that's completely legal. I can sell your social security number if I tell you that I'm not going to give it away on my website.
Well, the majority of companies, they're not selling your social security.
Sorry,
the majority of
bank
companies,
information, your phone number, everything.
they're selling things like your name, your birthday, your Gmail. It's those things, but actually not necessarily.
Maybe
A
your
lot of
address.
it-
With that, both the speaker and questioner may be seated.
Like I did. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Seeing that was a speaking negation, any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. Once again, any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. It's very early in the round. The chair would definitely suggest an affirmation speaker go. No affirmation speakers. The chair does frown upon the outside of debate. The debate must go on. Any and all negation speakers. Senator Misra.
That is Senator Misra speaking for the final time today on the negation.
1 second, really quickly. But I just want to address the chamber really quick. The procedure for motions is before anything, just so you're aware. So, like, if someone's standing for a speech, say that. Senator Misra, you have it.
Misra, Arnav, Misra, Before I begin, I know my dad's not in this room, but I'd just like to thank him for pulling me all the way over here, and I really appreciate everything you've done. Pretty good too. Watergate was a political scandal in the 1970s that included everything from bugging the offices of your political opponents to the misuse of federal agencies. Now, Nixon and his allies hid it for 2 years, and they could have buried it for dozens of more years, if not for the efforts of 2 Washington Post reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Burnside. Together, they published article after article illuminating the truth to every American. They truly exemplified the motto of their institution: democracy dies in darkness. Today, I'm not standing for a side. I am standing for the basic principles of democracy and freedom that this nation was built on. Now, today's bill isn't just misguided. It's so incredibly vague to a point where nobody in this room should be comfortable affirming it. Now, undoubtedly, Senator Drubetskoy intended to target the databases of tech giants and give Americans control over their data. But because the wording is so broad, this bill also includes the Guardian's database, Twitter's database, and every other form of free expression under the sun. If we pass, politicians and citizens alike could selectively scrub the internet of anything critical to themselves because Section 1A allows them to delete whatever they want. And honestly, I feel like I shouldn't have to explain why destroying free speech in America is bad. But Wired explains on May 13, 2014, after the EU implemented legislation like these measures today, it ended up amounting to nothing more than censorship. Because after the EU passed that bill, the content that people could remove was legal content. It wasn't false, it wasn't illegal, it wasn't libelous. People could remove it just because they didn't like it. That's censorship. Now, many of my colleagues in this room might think that free media isn't put by this bill because they're going to think that personal data protections only apply to things like bank statements or tax reports. Well, I mean, those have and can be used to support exposés and expose the corrupt underworld of America, but that narrow definition of personal data just isn't true. The United States Department of Labor defines personal data as something that can trace or distinguish a person's identity. What? That is the most broadest definition of personal data I have ever heard in my life. Let me make it clear. Because this bill is so disgustingly vague, confusing, and complicated, if we pass, free speech in America will cease to exist. Meaning, no longer can we hold businessmen accountable. No longer can we hold companies accountable. No longer can we hold this chamber accountable. Now, next, I want to focus on Section 2. Now, this part of the bill attempts to define what entities this bill applies to. Again, it's incredibly vague because the reach of the FTC is nearly limitless. I mean, traditionally, you might think that the FTC stays away from social media. But then just 1 year ago, on March 16th, 2023, they threw the rulebook at over half a dozen social media companies. On top of that, by far, the reach of the FTC is limitless. On top of that, they have the authority to regulate nonprofits. Guess who's a nonprofit? Well, just off the top of my head, ProPublica, the Associated Press, and the New York Times. Because the FTC has authority to run nonprofits, and because some of the greatest news organizations in our nation are nonprofits, this bill applies to news organizations. And frankly, as I conclude, Senator Beck and Senator Lawal, I don't care if this bill maybe marginally improves cybersecurity. Because improved cybersecurity never outweighs the freedom of the press in America.
Speech time, 3 minutes and 58 seconds. With that, two blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please. Any those standing that will first go to
I'm confused with the premise of this argument. If I'm allowed to do anything that
relates to me on the internet, how does that affect free speech across the internet?
Yes, so if you're like a politician or if you're a big businessman and a news organization releases a report.
I understand, but that's not my personal data that I put on
Yes,
the
it is. It would be, no, it would be, I already explained to you that because the definition of personal data is so vague, so many things apply under this.
The point of this legislation is to allow our people to keep their data.
Yes, I agree. I admit it. That's the intent. But
data are covered already.
It doesn't say personal data, it says individual data. So if you say something like, I mean, Senator Drubetskoy, I can't take that off because it's your data. So why is it personal information?
Right, and if you read through the bill, you realize how incredibly vague it is.
Well, I read through the bill. I wrote it. It says individual data. It's
Yes,
not like what you define by
and an individual's data can be used to publish exposés like it's been used countless times in the past.
Say, if the Associated Press writes something about me, that's not my data.
Well, they're going to support their claims with evidence. That's going to be a personal data.
With that, both the speaker and questioner may be
Point
seated.
of personal privilege.
Take that.
Re-enter the chamber.
Granted. Seeing that was a speech in litigation, any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. Once again, any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. This is the TOC, and they have certain rules and procedures. Senator Marathe.
I take the chair. Hi everyone, Representative Marathe. Senator Marathe, spelled M-A-R-A-T-H-E. Second time today. If anyone isn't ready. What's Apple's biggest asset here? Is it their million dollar Silicon Valley offices? Is it their thousands of dedicated employees? I'm here to tell you it's none of those. It's you and me. Because every day, without even knowing it, we give Apple thousands of dollars of our personal property, and we aren't even asked if we want to do it. Fundamentally, pass this legislation to ensure that people have the right to decide what we do with our own data. Right off the top, I want to look at what this legislation actually does. Section 1D mandates that companies cannot internally process or sell data without the explicit permission of the person whose data it is. Data is owned by the individual. This bill enshrines that in law. What does that mean? Suddenly, companies have to actually make sure that their consumers want to sell the data. Because Senator DuPaul is right. These companies can't survive if they don't sell and use data. What we're changing is the incentive structure. As the International Association of Privacy Professionals writes, in 2021, when we changed the data structure to an opt-in policy, suddenly, companies have to actually sell the fact that they're selling their data to other companies. They have to market it to their consumers, and they have to make sure that consumers actually want their data to be sold. That means, suddenly, companies like Apple, Google, and Facebook have to provide adequate privacy policies and show their consumers why selling data is best, not only for the companies, but for the consumers too. We finally help Americans. Senator DuPaul, of course, right now, Americans don't want their data to be sold because they don't even know where that data is being sold to under this legislation. Finally, companies have to tell Americans what they're doing with their data. That changes lives. As the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation writes, in 2021, when we make privacy policies readable under Section 1, constituents finally understand how their data is being used and where their data is going. That leads to increased transparency and better, safer usages of data. Representative Drubetskoy spent her entire speech talking about internet safety. That gets exponentially better when companies finally have the basic incentive to protect our citizens on the internet landscape that they spend so much of their time on. Senator Misra says that Section 1 destroys free speech in this country. Read the bill. Section 1A says that people can delete their personal and individual data. That's data companies have collected on them. That's not data that other people are writing about them. That's my birthday, not somebody telling someone what my birthday is on a Twitter thread. There's the key difference that finally accesses all of the impacts that me and Senator Drubetskoy have told you about. Senator DuPaul, you told us that innovation would decrease under this legislation. even if you're right, frankly, innovation should never come at the cost of individual people's personal and public lives being broadcast to anyone that wants to see. At the end of today's debate, I want you to remember the most important impact will always be the safety of the people that we are here to protect. That's what the affirmation is affirming. When we finally force companies to adhere to what their consumers want, we finally allow every American in this room and across the country to feel safe and protected in the internet spaces they spend hours on. That's the most important impact in today's round. Because right now, Apple, Google, and Facebook steal our data and we can't even object. Change that.
Speech time 4 minutes and 7 seconds. With that, 2 blocks of questioning. If you know wishing to question, please rise. Even though stating that will first go to Senator DuPaul.
We can both agree that there are targeted ads that are bad, correct?
Yes.
But can we also both agree that not all targeted ads are bad?
Yes. I'm not saying targeted ads stuff. I'm saying companies have to actually sell the fact that targeted ads are good.
Why is banning all targeted advertisements better than tailored regulation?
We're not banning them. How? Because we're just forcing companies to sell the fact that targeted advertisements are good. No. Section 1A says people have to opt into their
Burnside.
Thank you. So what about Section 1A actually says that companies' privacy policies are going to become more real?
Section 1A actually says privacy policies need to be reviewed in the legislation.
No, it isn't. It just says that companies have to make their privacy policies available, which most of them already are.
Keep reading. It says the word reading.
Because actually, privacy policies are already readable enough. The majority of
even if I
Americans
take your
already
advice and assume it's not there, companies are incentivized to make their privacy policy readable because
Why?
it's the only way they do it.
With that, will the speaker and vice chair may be seated.
I think
Chair, thanks you. Seeing that that was a speech on the affirmation, any and all negation speakers, please rise. Senator Burnside on the phone.
Thank you so much. All right, hi everyone. My name is Senator Burnside, spelled B-U-R-N-S-I-D. Excited to speak for the second time this session. Hopefully the shouting out there will go away, but you know, it's okay if it doesn't. Just let me know if you're not ready and I'll begin this session. 6 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg testified in front of Congress as to why his company, Facebook, had violated the rights of 70 million Americans. Today, this Congress has to justify as to why we've let big technology get too big to fail. But while big technology hasn't failed, this Congress's actions have failed time and time again in ripping away our constituents' right to choose. It's about time this Congress defends that failed this piece of legislation. So far, Senators Drubetskoy and Marathe on the affirmative have told you AI and internet technologies are reaching their peak, and people need to protect themselves. I actually agree with the affirmative that data companies mine data that they don't really need to, but they miss that Americans already have the choice to remove their data. Americans should be able to choose, not us. Consumer Reports writes in May of 2021 that with the rise of new AI and other internet devices, technology sends and receives data that actually isn't necessary to complete their immediate tasks. And these devices are also using demographic-based data in order to create the ads that Senator DuPaul told you about. The Harvard Business Review wrote in April of 2021 that 59% of internet companies use data pertaining to people's personal identity to generate personal content, letting people find better content online. But Senator Drubetskoy told you, people need to be able to protect themselves. The thing is, they actually already do. Your constituents are actually more educated than you think, Senator Drubetskoy, because they're already taking actions that they think are necessary for their own personal data protection. An FTC study found in January of 2024 that 54% of users stopped using apps or deleted their data when they had an ambiguous privacy policy or a policy they didn't like. People are already protecting themselves. You can't take away their choice. But now, if you can't, you take the choice out of the hands of consumers and keep them from using the apps they want to. Why? Because innovation relies on these data mining and data sharing practices. If apps can't do it, apps go off the market. The Canadian company wrote in July of 2019 that with the rise of demographic interest-based data mining, the number of these technologies
has increased from 13% to 25% in the past decade alone. This means that without these data mining policies, millions of Americans probably won't be able to access the apps they love and keep have. But okay, no one on my side has told you why that actually matters. Let me finally be the first. Underprivileged women heavily rely on women's health apps to survive, and without data mining, those health apps won't exist anymore. Med Device Online wrote in April of 2023 that data mining on period tracking apps helps to end a diversity disparity between minority and white women in women's health research. Because if these data mining apps aren't able to access that data, then there's a lack of Hispanic and Black women's data in the health research that women need to survive. Everyone on the affirmative has to explain to my female constituents today why they won't be able to access the essential women's health care they need. They need to explain why you've taken away my constituents' inherent American right to choose. Because it's always Americans who need to have their birthright ability to choose where they want their data to go. They already have it. This bill threatens to take that away. Don't let that happen. Fail this piece of legislation.
Speech time 3 minutes and 49 seconds. With that, 2 blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please rise. Between those standing, first go to Senator Huang.
Hi, Senator. So let's say they do have this right to somehow correct their data. Technically, people also do have the right to look at their terms and conditions before they consent to data.
Yeah.
Is that working in the status quo?
Yes, I literally provided you an empiric showing the majority of people who actually
read the terms and conditions before they ask the ad not to track, other than Senator Cotton.
Yeah, so actually there's a lot of people in this room saying they do. And actually, the numbers go with that. The numbers go with that. You can't deny an empirical study, it's just the truth.
I can't deny that.
Hi, this legislation puts a blurb on those apps that says if you let us use our data, we'll save lives. Why did that hurt those apps?
Because it means, it doesn't make them say put a blurb on their website that say they save lives. It just does the exact same thing. It allows people to read the terms and conditions, except it makes a lot of companies not able to innovate.
Human readable.
They already are. I read my terms and conditions, and the majority of your employees already do. Really? You don't? I mean, you're in the minority, I guess. I don't know.
Seeing that was a speech in the negation, any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. Senator Lawal, unopposed.
I thank the chair. This is Senator Lawal, spelled L-A-W-A-L. Once again, spelled L-A-W-A-L. Who am I? I think I'm a pretty amazing person, but Facebook sees me as a million data points. Instagram sees me as profit. And Twitter, I don't care what Twitter sees me as, okay? But for every single one of the social media companies who no longer see us as people, you affirm this legislation to make sure that they take a closer look at our populations. You affirm on the sole question of why shouldn't our people get the choice? Every single person on the negation has to prove that a lack of choice is better than them having the ability to choose what data goes to those companies. And never, ever will you be able to prove that. Because this is America, the country of choice. Representative DuPaul tells you that that choice is going to cost these companies too much. First, I don't care. The data of our people demands more protection and whatever that cost actually is. Then, Representative Burnside and DuPaul also tell you that it decreases the quality of personalization. It's their choice to decrease the quality of their personalization. It doesn't affect the majority of people. If I decide that Instagram doesn't want to have my birthday, that's my decision, and I guess I just won't get that notification when Instagram says, happy birthday. It changes per person. It's your choice when it comes to your data. That's the way it should be. Representative Burnside then tells you that passing this legislation suddenly ends all versions of data mining. But nowhere in this legislation does it explicitly say that companies cannot mine your data. Instead, all it says in Section 1B is that they need your express permission. It means that these companies ask you if you want your data to go to them. They give you a choice. We give you a choice the minute you pass this legislation. But aside from the quality of choice, I want everyone to take a look at Section 1B, because we're only focused on the idea of data privacy, not the people who report whether or not those data privacy laws are even being breached. Take a close look at Section 1B. It finally offers protections to people who are whistleblowers in those companies. So employees in Twitter can finally be able to report whether or not data is being breached in their company. Same thing for Instagram, same thing for Facebook. It's a quality that's severely lacking right now. There's literally nothing on the national level that protects these whistleblowers. The National Review explains in April of 2020 that right now, the only national law that protects whistleblowers only protects those that work with the federal government. Same thing on the state level. Paycor explains in December of 2021 that only 18 out of 50 states have protections for employees who don't work for the government. In those other states, you are penalized, your reputation is tarnished, and you lose your livelihood for the sole reason that you wanted to protect your fellow Americans. But when you pass this legislation, in Section 1B, you give them that ability to fight. You protect them with the might of this government. And that's extremely beneficial because those whistleblowers are key to providing evidence in investigations that make sure your data is secure. The Guardian explains in October 2021, the whistleblowers are the most powerful tool for enabling scrutiny and accountability. In fact, ACO quantifies in March of 2024 that in investigations that include whistleblowers, specifically in data privacy cases, they are successful in convictions 100% of the time. You need somebody on the inside to tell you what's really happening. You need somebody on the inside to protect our people who can't see anything from the outside. But because we are inside of this room, we have the ability to do the same thing. And it is our responsibility to protect those out there from the actions of the people we can't see from out here. Pass this legislation, protect our people, and finally give them the choice that our country promised them.
Speech time 4 minutes and 1 second. All those wishing to question, please rise. Window standing will first go to Senator Raoufi.
Hi, Senator. What happens when we change the entire business structure of these tech companies?
I don't think we are.
Wait, we're telling them that they can't sell our data, they have to provide us services, and we're putting all these regulations on them. Does that not at least change their structure?
No. It changes the way they collect your data. That does not have anything to do with the way they operate.
But if their entire business structure is collecting data, and we're changing all of that, it changes their structure, right?
No, that's not the only thing these companies are able to operate off of. Wait, you're acting like it's revolutionizing it. It's not. A lot of these companies already have stipulations that say if you don't want your data to be transferred,
Now wait a second. How does whistleblowing work?
Whistleblower is like an employee from within a company complains against the company.
Right, and Senator Misra warns that usually involves leaking some degree of personal information about the offending parties, right?
Yes.
Okay, what good is protecting whistleblowers if this bill prevents them from blowing the whistle?
This bill does not. In Section 1B, it protects them against employer retaliation.
Again, what's the point of protecting whistleblowers if they can't blow the whistle?
They can blow the whistle because now they're protected.
But they're not protected.
With that, both the speaker and questioner. Seeing that was a speech in the affirmation, any all negation speakers, please rise. Senator Lawal, that's a speech.
Yeah, that's a speech.
Senator Lawal, state that.
Thank you. This is Senator Lung, spelled L-U-N-G, here to give you a second and final breathtaking speech in this round. Same deal as usual. I'm assuming everybody's ready. Just yell at me very loudly. When I was 7 years old, my biggest fear was monsters under the bed. When I was 11 years old, my biggest fear was puberty. Today, I am 17 years old, and my biggest fear is that if my group chats with Senator Lawal and Cathoria get leaked, we're all getting impeached. Trust me, if my digital footprint is on the line in today's legislation, I have just as much as a vested interest as all the constituents in the back do in protecting my privacy. But it's because today's legislation compromises privacy further that you failed this legislation. So far, the affirmative argues that privacy and transparency are extremely important. I agree with Senator Marathe and Lawal. I am morally opposed to any argument from my side about innovation or profit, because that will never outweigh human autonomy and the right to privacy. But second, the reason we failed this legislation is because security decreases, meaning that same human autonomy and the right to privacy becomes weaker. Right now, I want to introduce you to a concept, to something called end-to-end encryption, which is used by something like Facebook, WhatsApp, Gmail, every major tech company. Here's how it works. Say I'm sending an email to Senator Ostheimer. My email gets uploaded to Google servers. Senator Ostheimer's computer then downloads that email and he's able to read it. But here's where end-to-end encryption comes in. Before my email gets uploaded to Google servers, my computer scrambles it and creates a key for it. The only person who has that key to decipher my email is me and the person I'm sending it to. Meaning, end-to-end encryption is so secure that the companies who have your data don't even know how to crack it. But that's what changes under today's legislation. Section 1 says, quote, entities are required to export an individual's data in a human-readable format. Right now, companies can't even see your data because it's scrambled on their servers. They don't have the key. But if we are requiring them to hold all of our information in a human-readable format so we can export it, sure, that creates some level of transparency. But I don't think that outweighs the security I would actually feel if nobody could see that data except for me and anyone I wanted to see. If you're confused, let's just put it very simply. End-to-end encryption is the most secure form of cybersecurity out there, period. It's so secure, companies who have your data on their servers can't even do it. This bill gets rid of it. Now, I'm not bringing up a new argument this late into the round because I didn't read my judge's paradigms. I am using this because end-to-end encryption is the single argument enough to outweigh and turn every single affirmative argument you've been presented to. First, let's talk about how this is non-exclusive with this legislation. We can just make private companies make their privacy policies clearer without compromising privacy and getting rid of end-to-end encryption. We can protect whistleblowers and provide accountability without getting rid of end-to-end encryption. We can implement everything, but we don't have to compromise security. So I don't see why the affirmative wants to do that. I want to reframe this debate around security. It's the highest value you place in today's round. Fail this legislation because cybersecurity gets worse without end-to-end encryption. But that is slowly changing because even though cybersecurity is vulnerable right now, the E-Safety Commission writes in October of 2023, more and more companies are adopting end-to-end encryption. Let's establish the comparative and go back to the example of my email with Senator Ostheimer. With end-to-end encryption, even if I hack into Google servers, I can't see anything because of end-to-end encryption. Without end-to-end encryption, if I get into the server, I can see everything that's on there. Now, sure, it sounds like Google, Amazon, Microsoft will be very secure, but that's not true. Firewall Times writes in October of 2023, even the most flagship forms of cybersecurity experienced attacks. Between 2021 and 2022 alone, Amazon experienced 8 cyber attacks that leaked thousands of identities. This is what this debate is about. We protect the people who suffer from identity theft. Because 500,000 people, according to the Journal of Information Policy, suffer from identity theft. We see increased rates of sadness, shame, depression, anxiety, stress, and anger. People shouldn't feel that way.
Speech time 4 minutes and 9 seconds. With that, 2 blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please. Between those standing, that will first go to Senator Baek.
Hello. Is removing end-to-end encryption like this new thing that no one's done before?
I mean, I'm assuming people haven't done it because it would be very bad.
Actually, it exactly happened in the EU and in California when we passed more privacy laws. Did these companies suddenly get cyber attacked?
Well, you have to prove to me that the security we have in the status quo needs to be valuable.
Actually, I
transparency.
argue today's legislation increases cybersecurity.
It doesn't increase cybersecurity if you get rid of the strongest form of cybersecurity.
But business just gets hacked all the time. Would a consumer use it?
No, but we can decrease that risk.
So wouldn't we incentivize them now that they have the choice to?
Well, if we cybersecurity, we get hacked. It's exporting it.
It says upon request.
No.
I'm not requesting, hey, can I see the security behind my email with Senator Ostheimer?
Right.
I'm requesting,
Let me explain,
what's
though.
my birthday?
All of your information is being stored on a company's server because of end-to-end encryption. They can't read that data.
Wait, but it doesn't have to be
but
stored that
if they
way
can
all
export
the
it,
time.
if they need to export it in a human-readable format, they need to get rid of it.
But they only need to export it if it's upon request. It doesn't need to be stored upon request in human-readable
They're
format.
still storing it that way, or else
Why
you're
would
not
they
going to be
store it
able
that
to
way if they can only do it
You can't
if it's upon
export
request?
it if you're not storing it
We
right
have
now.
another speaker in question remains. Seated. safe data. Granted. Seeing that that was a speech in the negation, we are now in line for an affirmation speech. Any and all affirmation speakers, please rise. Senator Beck unopposed.
I thank the chair for the reference of the judges in the chamber. This is Senator Beck for the ABK. Senator Beck, back down it again, second and last speech in this round. I know we have a lot of speakers to get through. This round's already been pretty inefficient, so I'll just assume all the judges are ready. Please let me know if you are. Great. One of the first lessons that I learned from a fellow senator is that the beauty of American democracy is not the choices we make for Americans, but the power we give them to make choices themselves. And while I learned this lesson long ago, it seems that our largest corporations haven't picked it up. They usurp our power and actively deny our constituents the ability to their own identities. But what was taken from the people shall be returned to the people. Now, if there's one thing in today's debate that we can all agree on, it's that today's round is mainly centered around prices. More specifically, everyone from Senator DuPaul to Senator Burnside on the negation has said that today's legislation will raise prices. More specifically, through pay-to-opt-out systems where people will have to pay more to remove their data collection. But here's the beauty of today's legislation. Even if consumers have to pay just a little bit more for their data, it is still better than the status quo. Because today's legislation guarantees that at least that data is clear and controlled instead of being hacked and stolen because of identity theft. Fundamentally, you passed today's legislation to create a data-secure America by putting a check on corporate power. But I want to end this debate once and for all, because my side has already told you about the importance of choice. But from Senator DuPaul, Misra, to even Senator Marathe and Lawal on my side, everyone is basically just cold conceded that cybersecurity doesn't change. I want to prove to you that today's legislation directly incentivizes companies to protect your identities more. Why? Well, the proof is in the European Union. In 2016, the EU passed the GDPR, a data law with 6 statutes that includes publicizing data policies, giving Americans control over their data, and issuing data protection offices. The exact same things that today's legislation does. But what happened? Well, CPO found in December of 17 that these new laws motivated companies to spend $7.8 billion on cybersecurity. Why? Well, it's pretty obvious. If a consumer knows that you're going to be hacked with a business, that business won't be used. And the only way to get incentivized that is by creating cybersecurity. But let's rush to California, because it's even better. As the California Consumer Privacy Act found, when we gave consumers the ability to restrict data, the Patchwork Information Security Platform found in July of 2020 that demand for data protection startups increased by 120%. When we give Americans the choice to control their data, companies have no choice but to protect it. Senator Raoufi and Lawal, this is why your framework falls. Because when these different countries and regions established these policies, prices didn't rise and cyber attacks went down. But why does any of this matter in the first place? It's because the National Council on Identity Protection finds in 2023 that corporations that increase cybersecurity will protect 5.7 million identities from being stolen. And the AARP continues that the average American loses $2,800 every cyber attack. Whether it be ensuring that this Congress is beholden to the people who are secure, or ensuring that our companies are beholden to cybersecurity, it is obvious. This Congress doesn't take action, your citizens will be the ones that suffer. Why does that matter? It's because the Atlantic finds that the average American has less than $1 extra a day after basic necessities. When you pass a legislation and people die because of these different identity thefts, your Americans are the ones who pay for it. The beauty of American democracy ultimately comes down to the power that we, the people, have.
Speech time, 4 minutes and 3 seconds. With that, 2 blocks of questioning. Any and all wishing to question, please be those standing. That will first go to Senator
Okay, so let's say the New York Times takes a photo of me accepting a bribe or doing a scandal. Can they publish that under this bill?
I mean, if the person says no, then they can.
So essentially, you concede that we're destroying free press. We can't hold the politicians accountable.
No, that's not true. Because like in most cases where like these emergencies happen,
Wait, what do you mean emergencies?
Okay, like the most cases there's like public bribery. It's not just like they can withhold their data, right? Usually,
I mean, if I have a photo that proves this,
that allow them to like.
If I have a photo that proves this,
I don't own that data.
Hi, is today's legislation the same as the GDPR passed by the EU?
It's very similar in like
What's missing?
I'm sure you can tell me.
We don't have any new cybersecurity requirements. The EU did.
Yes, we do.
No, that's why their security got better. This
Today's
eliminates the
legislation
strongest
says
form
that
of security we have right
protect
now.
the reason why these different businesses increase cybersecurity wasn't because of the guidelines.
It's because of the mandate. In the EU, if they don't have a certain security mandate, they can't.
In California, they didn't have that mandate.
Yeah, because California is not Europe.
But yeah, that's even better because we're America.
With that, both the speaker and questioner may be seated. State that. Excellent. Granted. So now that is it for my time, Senator Lawal.
Thank you.
That's it for my time. That's Senator Sethi, Sethi, is your presiding officer. If you think I did a good job running a fair, fast, efficient, and fun chamber, I really appreciate the ranking so. Once again, that's Senator Sethi. Thank you very much. If you want to remember who I am, I'm the one with the good-looking photo on the PO sheet. Thank you very much.
Hey everyone, that's Senator Procaccino, your final PO for this round today. I'm just going to get straight to it really quick. My tiny URL is tinyurl.com/Procaccino, PROCACCINO, and I'll leave it up here for you guys if you need it in the middle of the round. I'm not going to go over my gathering procedures again because you guys have been in this round for 2 hours, unless anyone needs it to. Alright, awesome. So I'm just going to jump straight into it, and that PO sheet's working for everyone. Great, so we're going to continue debate on this bill. Does that PO sheet work for you? TOC, yeah. Awesome. Alright, negation speakers rise. Senator Ostheimer.
I thank the chair.
Hello everyone, my name is Senator Nicholas Ostheimer, speaking for the second and final time today in the negation of the Consumer Online Privacy Rights Act. That is OSTHEIMER. Judges, please give me a heads up if you're not ready, otherwise I'll start. George Santos lied about a lot of things. He told reporters he was Jew-ish. He used campaign money for Botox, personal travel, and OnlyFans? What started out as a discovery on Twitter turned into a national news story, turned into a congressional investigation that finally removed him from office. But today, you failed, because this bill stops both law enforcement officials and whistleblowers from speaking truth to power. First, this bill prohibits the use of personal data by law enforcement officials because it prohibits companies from handing it over voluntarily. Section 1B says that entities are prohibited to transfer an individual's data to a third party without affirmative express consent. So basically, if the FBI is investigating you, they have to ask you permission to get your incriminating data. I wouldn't say yes. TechCrunch writes on May 21st of 2023 that law enforcement already now can just buy any of your data that it can't currently seize. So the FBI can just buy any data that it can't just get with a warrant. Now, don't panic, but they do that pretty constantly. NPR writes on August 14th of 2022 that over 2,000 state and federal investigations just last year asked companies like Twitter and Google to hand over or sell private data to help investigations. And most of the time, they comply. Senator Baek, this is the #1 way in which prosecutors catch child predators and the producers of child pornography. What use is choice to children whose lives would be ruined by the passage of this bill? What use is choice to the thousands of law enforcement officials whose choices would be limited by an irresponsible Congress? But second, this bill makes it impossible to blow the whistle on politicians and CEOs because it empowers them to delete any mention of their personal information. But first, Senator Lawal tells you that this bill improves protections for whistleblowers. He's right. Technically, it's like repairing your tenant's roof right after evicting them. Thanks a lot, I guess. Senator Misra already proved that personal info is so broad that this bill enables rampant censorship. So if I tweet that I saw Senator Beck practicing his fully Trump sponsorship right before this round, he can just ask Twitter to take that tweet down. Because I used his name. That is the epitome of personal info, and don't let Senator Drubetskoy convince you otherwise by contorting the definitions in her own bill. But let's apply his argument more directly to the round. The Crisis Group writes in November of 2022 that social media was the preferred method in 92% of high-profile whistleblowing cases, including the whistle blown on Facebook leadership by Mark Zuckerberg for his data collection and exploitation. They prefer this over official reporting mechanisms or going to the press. Wow, Senator Burnside. This bill to protect data privacy would have stopped the biggest investigation of a data tech giant for data privacy violations. This chamber castigates these giants for data abuse. Don't take away one of the best methods we have for holding them accountable. Now, these 2 points do have something in common. A simple flaw in Senator Drubetskoy's terms and conditions. Senator Burnside addressed us all by actually reading them. Now, let me rewrite them. Stand with me for an amendment to amend Section 3 to only protect that data that was originally entrusted to the entity by the consumer. That preserves the spirit of this legislation, ensuring that data entrusted to social media sites isn't leaked. But it enables law enforcement and whistleblowers to access data that incidentally relates to the offending party. Sometimes I get the haunting impression that George Santos still sits in this Congress. Is it just me, or does he look a little bit like Senator DuPaul? Reassure me that he isn't still here today. Fail.
Thank you, Senator Ostheimer. Speech time 3 minutes 51 seconds. Question is rise. Senator Ostheimer.
Why does the FBI buy data in status quo?
Because they're allowed to, and it helps them conduct investigations.
Why can't you just get a warrant instead of having to buy data?
Because a lot of the times they can't get a warrant.
No, because it's not that they can't get warrants. That's not Senator status quo. It's because they think that it's easier. So when you protect our when you protect our constituents, why would this legislation help them?
If it's easier for law enforcement to buy data instead of getting a warrant, why should we get in their way?
Why does law enforcement have to infringe on individuals' rights to buy data when they can go use it?
Senator Melendez.
First of all, Representative DuPaul's a beautiful man. He doesn't look like Santos. What about the filthy rich, right? They already do everything in their power to hide the data in the first place, right? Aren't there already benefits outweighing that we should protect minorities that are exploited rather than just trying to stop those who are already part of the catch in the first place?
Sure. That's
right.
Exactly
so that's why
you
you should affirm.
You should pass my amendment to make sure that we can do that without actually stopping the FBI and whistleblowers from getting in the way of investigations.
We'll take your seats. Senator Ostheimer, would you like to submit your amendment in writing?
Yeah, I've appointed personal privilege to submit this amendment.
Okay, great. And the parliamentarian and I will review this during the next speech.
I thank the chair.
Chair, thanks to you. Affirmation speakers rise. Between those standing, Senator Leanne.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, everyone. Sorry, give me a second. For my judges, once again, that's Senator Leong, Liant, second and final time in this year's champion. I gave the sponsor all the way back on the first bill. That helps me find me on the ballot. Comes up with me business.
Okay, so some quick amendment etiquette, friends. I know they're rare, but you must say on your amendment form what you're adding or striking. Otherwise, we have no idea how to interpret what your amendment is. Thank you.
This Congress has gotten a case of skewed priorities because our counterparts in the House, instead of legislating about anything actually important, have spent the past few weeks debating about whether we should ban TikTok. I know, what a big national issue considering everything we're facing right now. So, I want to get us back on track. Past this bill. I think everyone in the state has gotten our priorities wrong. Senators Lawal, Beck, and Burnside go back and forth about the freedoms of choice, but they're missing the most important link. I want to bring it back to Senator Drubetskoy's sponsor. This speech should be about the right to privacy, security, and safety for our citizens. not about the choice to choose whether or not you get that safety. That's a fundamental right. Now, with this framework, I want to see why the nation fails. Because all their priorities have been misaligned. First, Senators DuPaul and Misra start off the speech by advocating for companies, saying that innovation goes down and small companies die when they're data. And Senator DuPaul tells us that, well, data isn't actually that important. It's maybe just your email, your birthday, or maybe something slightly more important being leaked. That's actually not true. WBRC finds in October 2021 that unnamed companies are collecting data so personal to you that most people are likely not even going to share it with their closest friends. When your deepest secrets are being leaked on the web, I don't think that's outrageous. By saying that companies suffer, I mean, come on, are you really defending a company's bottom line over your everyday constituents? It seems like we've got a case of mixed priorities. But then, Senator Burnside says it's important because people have a choice to choose whether their data is on the internet or not. Well, sorry to break it to you, but cybersecurity is really advanced. People don't have a choice. New York Times tells me September 2021 that data is currently passed around between so many third parties that your data can be anywhere on the web right now. When T-Mobile was breached, 40 million people's data was bought out into the wide web. And some of those people didn't even use T-Mobile. If I don't even know where my data is right now, how am I supposed to know how to keep it safe? That's why this bill is so important. Finally, I want to end with some way, because Senator Long tells us that cybersecurity is empirically the most important thing in this debate. Well, I think end-to-end cybersecurity doesn't seem to be working super well right now. Because if companies can't see your data, well, hackers certainly are. Fortune tells us in October 2021 that data breaches have already caused 281.5 million people to have their personal data being stolen and accessed by hackers. If this cybersecurity can't protect our constituents right now, obviously it can't do anything if we fail this bill. The most important priority should be ensuring at least they have control over the data they can see. But then, Senator Ostheimer comes up and tells you that, oh, FBI investigations are super important and they should be the priority. Like Senator Burnside told him in questioning, the FBI has a perfectly legal means of obtaining information. If they want to get their data, all they need is a warrant. They don't need to go buying data from shady third parties or Google. They can just ask for it. The most important priority in any debate should always be the concerns of our people. So when they are asking you to protect their privacy, finally stop time to get our priorities aligned. Pass this bill.
Thank you, Senator Yang. Speech time 3 minutes 52 seconds. Questioners rise. Between those standing, we'll first go to Senator Cristopher.
Why isn't everybody's data just out there in the open right now and everybody getting it?
Well, a lot of people are getting hacked.
Yeah, why isn't everybody? It's still a minority, right?
Sure.
Why isn't everybody in the world or everybody under
because
the company
cybersecurity exists.
Because of end-to-end encryption, right? Whenever you pass this legislation and make it almost impossible for companies to implement that technology.
Okay, I don't buy that end-to-end encryption is the only cybersecurity method ever that can
It's
protect
not,
our
but it's the
data.
one that applies to individuals the most as opposed to companies who have cybersecurity across the whole country.
Okay, then why did Senator Beck say in California cybersecurity actually
DuPaul.
You tell us that companies are selling the deepest, darkest secrets that people aren't even sharing with their consumers. Give me an example. What is that type of data?
Right, your financial data, your bank account, your social security number, stuff like that.
Really, the majority of companies are selling your social security number on the internet.
Yeah, I know you want to believe companies are super good or
Okay.
super righteous,
So
but they're
clarify
really
the
not.
question here. Is the majority of data sold personally identifiable or not personally identifiable?
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag.
It's not personally identifiable.
Question
Why
number
is that
last,
so?
you both may be seated. The parliamentarian and I have ruled that this amendment is germane, so we will now read it out to the chamber. So in line 25, it will change the line processes or transfers covered data, period. All other definitions shall be defined by the FTC. 2, covered data that is originally entrusted to the entity by the consumer. So we'll now need a 1/3 motion to begin debate on this amendment. I'm just going to address you guys for a second. Because TOC restricts us to 2 speeches and finals, Senator Ostheimer will not be able to give a sponsorship on this amendment. So, who would like to, Senator Misra?
Could you just read that one more time?
Yeah, of course. So changes line 25. I can give you guys seconds to find legislation.
A motion before you do.
Yeah, sure. Great. Line 25 to covered data that is originally entrusted to the entity by the consumer. Anyone else have any other questions about the amendment context? Awesome. So we'll now move to vote on whether we want to debate this amendment. If you wish to debate this amendment, please raise your placard and keep it raised. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Awesome. That's a one-third vote. So we'll now begin debate on this amendment. Is there a sponsor present? Between those standing?
I have a motion.
Senator Ostheimer, take that motion.
I move to the previous question.
Second. On the amendment?
Yes.
Okay. We can move to the previous question on the amendment. On the amendment without speeches, yes. All right. We're now going to. Are there any objections? We're now going to move to previous question on the amendment, not on the bill, on the amendment. And again, that content's in my spreadsheet. If you wish to pass this amendment to the legislation, please raise your placard and keep it raised. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. That is a clear majority. This amendment does pass. Remind you, we are now debating this legislation with this amendment. Does anyone else need the amendment read out? Yeah, sure. And again, it's on the spreadsheet. Line 25 of the legislation is changed to covered data. It's changed from covered data, period, to covered data that is originally entrusted to the entity by the consumer. Again, it's on the spreadsheet. Awesome. So, negation speakers on the bill rise. Take that. Great. Senator Khan, you have a
I think the chair, that's Senator Khan, spelled K-H-A-N. S-Con, if that helps. Give me a second and tell me when you're not ready, or if you're not ready. I'm going to be real. This room is hot. And it's because the affirmation is kind of cooking. The negation needs a backline. Let me provide it. Failed today's legislation. At this point in debate, here's what you're weighing. The safety of American data versus the survival of the companies who fail to protect it. I would vote for the affirmation if this is the end of the debate, but it's not. Right now, the current framework is by Senator Huang, Baek, and Maher. It's about cybersecurity. But I want to move it back to the most important framework today, started by Senator Lawal on the affirmation. Is having the right to choose causing a problem? Yes, it is. Section 1B of today's legislation says all data processing or transferring needs express individual consent. That's absurd. Now, negative speakers have already told you that's bad because companies just can't financially retaliate with that. If you don't believe that, at the highest bound of the affirmation, it still increases the amount of time that all of these data transfers take. Think about it. It's a 3-step process. Companies have to A, identify the data of each individual person and who they match up with. B, de-encrypt it like Senator Long told you. And then C, send it back to the person and wait for their express individual consent. Here's why that's so bad. For me, all that means is it takes a little longer to log on to TikTok and watch What's Up Brother TikTok. But for others, it's a life or death matter. MDPI research tells us that modern devices are becoming more and more prevalent in day-to-day life. They're becoming extensions of the human body. Things like sensors, biometric identification, and real-time alerts are saving lives. For example, Medtronic's digital blood glucose monitor sees your blood glucose levels and real-time looks at danger zones and alerts you if you need to change something or take insulin. Monitors just like that exist for heart attacks, strokes, and basically any general sickness you can imagine, and it's getting better with time. When this legislation passes, all of those real-time data transfers take longer. You have 5 minutes to call 911 after realizing your heart attack. That number goes down in a negative world. Improved technological improvement. That number is harder to realize in an affirmative world. That's the biggest impact of today's debate, because you save human lives on the negative. Now, I already know the affirmative response to this. It's only the information you're requesting. So, if the person just doesn't request the information, it automatically gets data transferred to the app. But that's not true. Because under today's legislation, companies have to prepare for not only the data you're requesting, but the data you might request. That's what this legislation is doing. So when all of these companies have to have the real-time data transfer available for you to access and see how they're getting it, it takes longer. At the end of the round now, here's what you're weighing. American safety for data and stopping exploitation versus human lives. I'm on the negation because I'm arguing that a human life is more important than your safety of your data. If I could have saved my uncle because he had this biometric device inside of him, I would have. But if I knew that my congressional ballot today would hurt him and make that data transfer harder for every other person who has it, I wouldn't be able to live with myself. Fail.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Speech time 3 minutes 52 seconds. Questioners rise. Senator Lawal.
Why does the data transfer have to happen in real time? Why can't they just give permission?
When I want my blood glucose monitor in, I want it to be in real time.
Then why can't they just give permission once and then the rest of the time?
Because that's not what under this legislation. This legislation says every single transfer.
Never says that.
Yes, it does. It says every single transfer has to have individual express consent.
The legislation never said individual express consent.
It says
all this said was express consent. Wait. On top of that, Representative Ostheimer just passed legislation that just passed an amendment that even proves, like,
Let's continue off of that previous line of questioning. Why can't a consumer just say, I provide affirmative express consent overall?
Because that's the entire, negates the entire premise of today's affirmation. You're saying that people need access to that data. Right, that's your entire ground.
Right, we still give people the opportunity to give their express consent for their data to be processed.
Today's legislation is about every single data piece being sold, or being represented to the consumer. That's what your ground is.
Right, I still don't see how affirmative express consent can be given at the very
beginning. On the left, you both may take your seats.
I take the chair.
Thank you. Affirmation speakers rise. Senator Huang, you have the floor.
I thank the chair. For the reference of chamber and judges, my name is Representative Huang, spelled Huang. Speaking for the second time this legislative session. All right. It's really hot in here. I know we all want to get out. Take silence as an indication. Fun fact. I work at DuPaul, and I know your entire search history. I just saw a couple heads pop up and eyebrows raising. So it really makes you think twice about your data security. On a more serious note, in the status quo, companies are selling data all over the country while our Americans take the brunt of the impact. So let's examine what this legislation does at its core, because this debate has gotten really messy. This legislation does two things. First, it provides data transparency for our constituents. And second, the ability to remove their data when they feel like it's necessary. But for the negation, they've set up so many frameworks that it's hard to keep track on who wins the debate. Let me win this debate for the affirmation. There are 4 frameworks that we need to win. First, does revenue take a hit under this? Second, does this inhibit free speech? Third, does this make regulation worse? And fourth, is end-to-end encryption a problem in this debate? Let's start off with the first framework and disprove it step by step. With Senators DuPaul and Burnside and Raoufi's argument about profit and innovation being a reason that we should negate this legislation. First of all, I am morally opposed to prioritizing profit over our constituents when they're literally sitting right there. But let's end this debate with evidence. And in the EU, after they pass legislation just like this one that's before us today, after they ban data tracking, they just want to other data, including geographic data that already exists in the status quo. That includes your IP address that people can track right now. But why is that better if they can still use data after this legislation? That data exists whether you pass or not. So if it's between you using private information like your social security number, your email, your contact information, or data that they already have, I'm incentivized and inclined to give those companies the opportunity to use that instead of the status quo. Specifically, the NYC stated that after this legislation passed, they just started using geographical targeting. That's what I just talked about. So companies don't take a hit in revenue. In fact, this legislation doesn't make apps not free or put barriers to our constituents. That doesn't completely solve the claim. So let's move on to the second framework. Does this somehow inhibit free speech? Let me tell you why that's not true, Senators Misra and Ostheimer. Under this legislation, consumers can just request their own data to be taken off of their databases that they have. What does this mean? It doesn't mean that when Senator Drubetskoy posts an article that says, I hate Senator Huang, that I request that to be taken off, that will. As she quantified in Procaccino literally 5 cycles ago, in cross-examination, she said that once people request their data be taken off, it's not your articles about other people. It's your personal phone number, email, and other things that are personal to your own data. I think it's imperative for that to be understood through the framework of the debate process. And the third framework, Senator Burnside, does this make applications like your product worse? No, it doesn't. Under line 17, you can only have affirmative express consent for your data be taken and processed by these companies. That is so important because when someone just consents to give their data, it's given to them. I think it's important to realize that people need the right to give their data, and they need the right to have their data not be processed. The last framework is from Senator Ostheimer. He said that there's a bunch of FBI warranting information that they need to process investigation. I think it's important to realize that there are trade-offs for protection that we need in the status quo. If right now, for example, the FBI wants to conduct an investigation on Senator DuPaul just because he looks like George Santos, they can do that after this legislation if they have a warrant. I think it's important to get over this speed bump in this debate that somehow we can't investigate or do warrants after this legislation. Let's go back to the key part of this legislation. Protect consumers' data privacy rights instead of fraud.
Thank you, Senator Huang. Speech time 3 minutes 58 seconds. Questioner Russ. Senator Huang.
Why should I be concerned about my data privacy rights when I know that the increased time it takes to cost of life?
Cost of life as in your biometric sensors data.
Exactly.
I just proved to you literally 2 cross-examinations ago that once they can give their affirmation express consent, that can apply to the entirety of that
theoretical line that's nowhere in this bill.
Did you just say I'm theoretically lying?
You came up with a theoretical line that's nowhere in this bill required. This bill requires express consent on every single
right.
thing.
So they
How is that more important than data privacy?
Senator Burnside.
The majority of people start removing their data because of this bill. How are critical apps like serious tracking apps going to publish it?
I think that the population of people who still use those apps will have data that they can have. It's not going to limit that
data. The majority of people who stay on the app and keep their data on the app.
Right.
Without that,
People want to use the apps. People continue to use the apps and consent to their data.
Why would they now? If our Congress is telling them to fear these companies,
we're not telling them to fear those companies. We're just telling them that there are threats out
I
there.
think that's the last one. Please proceed.
Take
that.
Granted the table.
Granted. Just a reminder to everyone, please make points of personal privilege between the questions I have in single part. Negation speakers rise. Okay, seeing none, affirmation speakers rise. Senator Melendez, you have the floor. This is an affirmation speech.
I thank the chair. Hello, everyone. This is Senator Melendez speaking for the final time in today's chamber. Cristopher Melendez, right? Let me know if you guys are not ready. Okay, great. People aren't born racist. It takes years of subtle and not so subtle impressions that create our biases. For example, in blockbuster movies where Superman is the portrayer, they cast handsome white men like Representative DuPaul. But for cholo scenes, it seems as though people look for people like me, portrayed as gangsters in criminal documentaries. Unfortunately, in a world of technology, all of these impressions are woven together to create the algorithms that guide our every single day life. Pass today's legislation to finally be the Congress to ensure these impressions don't hurt you for the rest of your lifetime. But first, it seems as though today's round has created a lot of lasting impressions we hope our judges forget. But unfortunately, that can't happen. It's today's legislation that ensures these lasting impressions don't affect our most vulnerable constituents. Let's understand how today's legislation reduces ambiguities because we keep minorities informed. Representative Burnside on the Negation told us that users already have the choice to just stop them from selling their data. The problem is that in the status quo, they don't really know what's going on. The Medium explains on August the 28th that 75% of users aren't bothered with companies selling their data simply because they don't really think it affects them that much. That's the problem that is happening in the status quo. Let's look at today's legislation, which honestly, ironically, is too long to read, just like these privacy policies in the first place. But luckily, I get paid to do that for you in the first place. Let's look to Section 1B, which says that now, without affirmative express consent, they cannot sell your data. This means, as well, that they need to tell us in ways we can all understand where it's going in the first place. This can ensure that minorities and those who don't have the privilege to understand legal talk can finally understand where our data is going. But Representative Beck, it's a lot more than just identity theft. It's also ensuring that you taint their identity for a lifetime. Because AP News explains on August 25th of 2021 that frequently people can breeze by the pre-approval process of trying to get a home mortgage. But now, more than ever, it's become extremely popular to use algorithms that scour your data to try and find any discrepancy that stops you from getting the loan in the first place. Disproportionately, 40% of the times, it's minorities that are just trying to look at another opportunity for a better life. Representative DuPaul, there may be small companies that shut down because we passed today's legislation. But if they're making their livelihood off of destroying the ones of minorities, they shouldn't exist in the first place. Representative Ostheimer, before you passed the amendment, I was going to tell you that we shouldn't prioritize trying to fix the problems that filthy rich are already trying to hide in the first place. But luckily, I think you're more willing to pass today's legislation. But let's understand the lasting impacts that today we create. Greater Washington explains in 2020 that homeownership can make it more possible for minorities to break the cycle of poverty. Whenever we pass today's legislation, we ensure that lasting impressions aren't the only thing that these algorithms can use against us. Because while we may see biases every single day, these algorithms are woven together to try and bring us together. But it seems as though every single day we only go further apart. Break those barriers. Pass today's legislation.
Thank you, Senator Melendez. It's time, 3 minutes, 56 seconds. Question is rise. Read no standing. Senator Raoufi.
Hi, Senator. What good is having access to your data if you can't do anything with it?
What do you mean?
If you have access to your data, but these services that take your data no longer can do anything with it, what's the benefit?
First things first, there are different ways to create profits. Either way, people can still pay these companies to portray their ads in the first place. There's different kinds of profitability.
You're absolutely right.
And inherently,
if
they can only create profits off exploiting minorities, they shouldn't exist in the first place.
Senator Misra.
According to the United States government, photos and videos are personal data.
Okay.
If news organizations can't use photos and videos as evidence, how are we going to hold politicians accountable?
Representative Ostheimer's amendment is supposed to help us mitigate that in today's legislation.
How does it mitigate it?
Because now, whenever you give data out, it can ensure that those entities...
If there's a photo of me committing a scandal, I'm not going to give that data out, so how does it...
Okay, if that photo goes on the internet in the first place, they don't have to ask for permission to see it.
My time left. You both may take your seats.
What definition of practicing are we operating off of?
I believe we're operating on the definition that can't get new information, new statistics that haven't been drawn.
Okay. That last instance, bring up US.
No, it actually wasn't. In my speech, I said...
we're not having open conversation right now. We're going to call for a recess. Of course. Negation speakers rise. Senator Raoufi.
Thank you, Chair.
For the records of the chamber, that's Senator Raoufi, R-A-O-U-F-I.
Now it's been a long day. I'll assume everyone's ready. Just let me know if you guys are ready. Opportunity. When my parents came from Iran just 2 decades ago, they were given opportunity. when every single American is guaranteed an education, they are given opportunity. The reason I'm speaking here today is because of opportunity. Don't take that away by passing today's legislation. So far, the Affirmation's advocacy revolves around this idea that we're going to increase the privacy of Americans and businesses are just going to somehow adapt. Let me prove in my speech why the Affirmation fails on both fronts. Passing today's legislation doesn't protect Americans' data from companies. Instead, it limits their access to them. Because right now, the entire business model of these companies is built upon data collection. As Aragon Research finds on August 18th of 2023, data services and companies don't just increase personalization, but they increase informed decision-making, innovation and products development, and decrease risk mitigation. It's literally what these businesses have built their models off of. But what does this translate in terms of statistics? Well, as the University of Pennsylvania finds on October 20th of 2022, data analytics organizations identify opportunities to streamline operations, reduce costs, and maximize profits by 36%. That is the same data collection that we're trying to get rid of in today's legislation. Businesses are going to take the hit. Senator Lawal, I want to protect Americans and their privacy. Let's increase the amount of protections for whistleblowers. Senator Marathe, let's increase security regulations. Senator Drubetskoy, let's make the terms and conditions more readable for humans who don't understand all the jargon. But what we can't do is not take accountability for how the businesses themselves are affected. Because giving Americans complete control over their data without considering businesses only rules to their detriment. Senator DuPaul tells us how the European Protection Plan hurt these new startups. Let me tell you how it hurt people. Alan McQuinn from the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation on August 5th of 2019 found that federal legislation mirroring key provisions of the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation cost $483 per U.S. adult using the internet. That's an extra $500 just for using the same free services that are guaranteed in the status quo. Why is that the case? Well, it's because today's legislation gives Americans two alternatives. The first is if we're just going to accept free data and we're going to promise free services, but we can't use their data, most of these businesses are just going to go bankrupt because I proved to you that's exactly what keeps their business afloat. But that's honestly not that realistic. Senator Drubetskoy, you tell us that this is the case, and you tell us the reason it is because of these ads. The difference is ads are specialized and targeted to people. They sell your data to make targeted ads. What happened, the alternative, is that these companies are just going to charge you more for the services that are free in the status quo. Manuel Denzer from the Information Economics Policy Journal on June of 2021 found that those who have access to data services are 26% less likely to be able to pay for them and are 81% less likely to find a job without them. Senator Lawal, you tell us we give Americans a choice. Let's give them the choice to find jobs, connect with their family, and support their communities. TLF found that the digital divide between high-income and low-income Americans has increased by 31% over the last decade. Let's not increase this disparity. Opportunity is not defined by the burdens Americans overcome, but the freedoms this government delivers. Fail.
Please, Senator Raoufi, speech time 4 minutes 5 seconds. Question is rise. Senator Liang.
Hey, so I'm a little confused. If I can choose whether or not companies use my data, and I want to access the benefits that you say data provides, why can't I just say yes and give them my data?
You can, but it's not going to be free, and that hurts low-income Americans.
Wait, but if I'm giving my data willingly, how does that make sense?
The reason that isn't free is because under today's legislation, you're not required to give your data, but they have to give.
That being said, if I could get a visual indicator for my judges, I would really appreciate it.
Sorry, I tried to deal with what was happening over here. Apparently it's the awards assembly now. So I think we're going to have loud clapping in the rest of the time. It is really important that questioners and speakers
Okay, this is the baseline now. I apologize. Can I please get a thumbs up from all of my judges? That would be greatly appreciated. Stand for accurate information. And when the entirety of today's round has been operating under so many misconceptions, I want to be the beacon that actually introduces the advocacy of accurate information. So far, the entirety of the negation has been framed under two systems, privacy and also corporation. Let's go ahead and look at the economic status of today's legislation and why it's so imperative that you pass. Every single representative, from Representative DuPaul all the way down to Representative Raoufi, all argue that when you pass today's legislation, you limit the amount of money and access that these corporations have to their clients. Let me be the first to tell you that doesn't happen. Why? The chief driving institute and why investors do not invest into data companies is because they're unreliable. According to Investopedia, in March of last year, 61% of investors do not want to invest if they don't feel comfortable investing. Why is that so imperative? If I am not comfortable giving my money to a data corporation, then these corporations will not innovate. And if we don't innovate, then we can't access any good innovation that Representative Raoufi, DuPaul, and all of the other negation speakers talk about. Innovation today is so critical. Why? Because when you innovate, you make it easier for private corporations, public corporations, non-profit corporations to do what they do best, help the American public. But then, this entire argument has gone back and forth about privacy. Let me again be clear on this argument. The affirmation is the only side that prioritizes privacy. Why? It enables individuals to choose whether or not they want to send all of their information. And Representative Ostheimer's amendment further solidifies that. When you pass today's legislation, you ensure that every single American, regardless of age, socioeconomic background, and every other factor, has the right to their options. That is the reason why you pass. Evidently, today's legislation fundamentally, baseline, allows for more opportunities. That is something no one on the negation can compromise. But then, I want to take one huge moment. Take a thanks to Representative Huang. He comes up here and tells you that when you fail today's legislation, you make it harder for corporations to look at AI. I'm sorry, Representative Huang, if you read the actual wording of today's legislation, you would understand that when you pass, Representative Raoufi is right. You're able to ensure that all of these data backlogs are actually instigated. So your end-to-end encryption still exists, but now it's better. Not only do you know what's happening, but your chats are also protected. So no one here is going to know whether you and Senator Lawal have been beefing or not. We're just going to know that it's better for us because you keep your privacy, you keep your status, and so does the American public. But now, the most imperative part of today's legislation, the institution of option. Why do you pass? Again, today's legislation increases innovation. Today's legislation is not just something short-term, it's long-term. It applies to everyone. The Brookings Institute in October of last year tells us that when you pass today's legislation or any regulatory legislation, innovation goes up. Like I said, repetition is key. So for those of you who didn't get it, innovation is your asset to success. When you innovate, you succeed. And when you succeed, this Congress succeeds. And when we succeed, our American constituents feel it best. Opportunity is present, Representative Raoufi. Your parents and every other immigrant has the ability to do what they need to do because you protect consumers, you protect corporations when you pass. That is the fundamental reason why I stand in proud affirmation. Come on, y'all, pass.
Thank you, Senator Audrey. Speech time 4 minutes exactly. Questioners rise. Three no standing. Senator Long.
Hi, what's the warranting as to why end-to-end gets to stay under?
End-to-end encryption is going to exist in either world, whether you pass
But why
or
does it stay under this world?
Because now consumers have the ability to look at what's happening and still are aware of everything.
They can already do that, and that's fine.
No, it
but
increases
now,
clarity in the status quo and still protects your rights as an
your
individual.
data is stored on company servers. The difference right now is that they can't see it. After this, they have to be able to
Can't
see it so they
see it.
can
Whether you pass or not,
No,
they still can't
The whole
see
point
it.
of end-to-end encryption is so companies can't see your data.
What is the warrant behind this bill increasing innovation?
Right. Investopedia March of last year tells us that, okay, when innovation goes up because investors feel comfortable investing, it means that these corporations have more money accessible.
Why
so
are
they can
investors
innovate.
more comfortable in investing in information companies when this legislation applies to big tech companies?
Because now they can, because when they feel comfortable, they're more likely to increase the amount of funding going forward.
But why is that comfort coming? Like, why are they
Because you
comfortable?
now regulate it. When you add regulations, you make it more
Time to
comfortable.
lapse. People may take your seats.
Thank you.
Sure,
Sorry
thanks
for the
you.
yelling.
No, don't worry about it. Thank you. Negation speakers rise. Senator Katoria.
Thanks, guys. I thank the president once again. That's Senator Katuria, spelled Kathuria. So proud to be, I'm assuming, the final speech in the 2024 Tournament of Champions Congressional Debate District. Communication if you're not ready. Thanks. Big tech is too big to fail. But we also have to admit that we love everything it gives us. I love Amazon. I love being able to get things in 2 days. I love Instagram. And even Tabroom was built off of a backend that Facebook invented. Most importantly, I love the skibbity-riz TikToks that send us to. We can't lie. The innovation that big tech has provided this nation cannot be allowed to crumble. Don't let the affirmation pretend that it's okay to let big tech fall. Strike down this kidnapped bill. Senator Lawal makes the biggest misconception in today's round. He says that your data does not affect anyone else when you take it away from these companies. But that's not how algorithms work. Sprout Social explains to us on October of 2023 that social media algorithms use your data to compare them with everybody else's to recommend you information that applies to all of you. At the end of the day, Senator Lawal, you are the reason I keep getting brain rot TikToks on my For You page. But the rest of the affirmation pretends that forcing companies to give the option is the best way to protect your data. I agree. That's why I think we should let them do what they're doing in the status quo. The industry is already moving towards opt-in in their own way. Apple, Chase, Amazon, LinkedIn, Google, Samsung, hundreds of other big companies, thousands of other small companies are already moving towards a system that allows you to opt out. The affirmations idea of opting out is already happening in the status quo. Then, why am I failing this legislation? Senator Lawal introduces a framework to today's debate. Why shouldn't Americans have the chance? But he is oversimplifying everything. The choice and the chance that this legislation provides to our constituents is way different than the choice they're getting when companies provide them the option in the status quo. Even after Senator Ostheimer specified that this bill allows you to delete data only you submitted, you are negating this legislation to protect the way the internet runs right now. I already told you that companies right now are moving towards an opt-out system in their own way. However, nobody has painted the distinction between what this legislation provides as opt-out and what they're doing. So I will read section 1 and 2 of this legislation. We force companies to, when a user decides to opt out, delete or not use any of that data or any of their services. But that's not exactly what companies are doing with their opt-out system in the status quo. Malwarebytes tells us on April of 2023 that the way opt-out systems work right now is you opt out of specific things like ads and selling user data. However, these companies are still able to use your user data for their own algorithms, ensuring that you're still getting the tailor-made experience that everybody knows and loves. So, this legislation, when you pass it, creates an opt-out system that when you decide to opt out, forces companies to not use that data at all. Why is that detrimental for the people of the United States? Invisibly on May of 2023, that when you are able to use technology that relates to you, that knows who you are, that knows what you need, you're able to find tailor-made experiences that can help you find jobs, find a social network, saves you time and money, and most importantly, finds you medicine, healthcare access. All the impacts that Senator Khan brought up in this debate are the most important ones for the negation. If you have a tailor-made experience, technology that is made for you can help you stay alive. At the end of today's debate, at the end of the Tournament of Champions, I implore you, This legislation gives our people no options, no experiences. The Affirmation had one job, to prove that deleting, getting rid of all of your user data was better than the opt-out systems that exist in the status quo. They failed, so you must too.
Thank you, Senator Katoria. Speech time, 4 minutes, 2 seconds. Question is Ross. Senator Ostheimer.
Hi.
Hey, let's talk technicality.
Yes.
When you use Twitter, what kind of data do you entrust to it?
The data that you use to sign up with your email and stuff, and then all the data that allows you, all the data they take from you, like what you like, and the different data that,
Wait a
what
second.
videos you like.
You do expressly give them information like your name and your email.
Yeah, stuff that you use to sign up.
Stuff like your consumer preferences
Well,
and
that
your
is something
history
you are giving them.
are incidental to your use. You're not giving it.
And you are giving it because you are deciding, as in the opt-in and out program, that you are allowed to use that data.
If
Hi.
personalized advertisements are so good, why won't consumers
I didn't say
opt in under this?
I didn't say personalized advertisements are so good. I'm saying in the status quo, the opt-out, let me finish. The opt-out systems that exist allow you to opt out of personalized advertising, but you get to stay in the algorithms that give you like recommended.
Personalized technology in general is so good, why won't
Because
consumers
under this
opt in?
legislation, there's no longer that personalized technology because they don't use any of your data as opposed to using some of it.
To opt in, why doesn't this personalized technology?
Sometimes last will continue to see Senator Melendez as a motion.
Motion to move the previous question.
Second. Any objections? Now we're to move the previous question on a bill titled the Consumer Online Privacy Rights Act. If you wish to pass, please raise your flag and select voice action. I count 1 Ostheimer, 2 Marathe, 3 Baek, 4 Lawal, 5 Ali, 6 Melendez, 7 Drubetskoy, 8 GA, 9 Huang. If you wish to negate, you stand and raise your flag until I call on your name. I count 1 Burnside, 2 Huang, 3 Long, 4 DuPaul, 5 Misra, 6 Raoufi, 7 Lulu. Any abstentions, there should be none. On a vote of 9 to 7 to 0, this legislation does pass. Congratulations, Senator Drubetskoy. Senator Huang will vote.
And move the orders of the day.
Seconds? All right, so we're going to move the orders of the day. Again, my name has been Senator Procaccino. It's been such an honor presiding the Tournament of Champions final round. Before you all pack up your things, I just want to congratulate you guys. We got through very few speeches. Everyone got a chance to speak despite some scary signs at the beginning of this round. And you answered every single question, 72 questions. Again, congratulations on the TOC final. I'm so proud of you all. And Judge, I mean, you guys did a good job of POing the session. I would appreciate it if you corrected the pool. So thank you, and at 1:01 p.m. we're now.